destroyed. So therefore, I think it is worth, to discuss why we should come back, to the Schumann's Europe, how to do that, what should be a response, towards this different, actions coming from different sides of the people or groups, political groups who are going to create a super state. So now I would like we cite a certain statement of the Schumann, who was against the super state, who was basically not willing the super state because, he anticipated this is a direction which can really very much indeed destroy the community of European nations.
So I have great pleasure to read one of main sentences of Robert Schumann. The idea is not to merge states to create super state. Our European states are a historical reality. From a psychological point of view, it would be impossible to do away with them. The diversity is a good thing, and we do not intend to level them down or equalize them. To our mind, European policy is certainly not in contradiction with the patriotic ideal. It encourages the particular nature and characteristics of each of its states and fosters to sound love for one's own country, which is a love that does not go in detriment of other countries. It wants to attain a unity in the fullness of its diversity.
So our conference is broadcasted via the internet on different media in entire Europe. So we hope we welcome, many viewers and as well participants who are in internet. And this will be saved on the YouTube, so there is an opportunity, to come back, to listen again to that different, statements and to different opinions we are going, to listen today. So the super state would bring the European Union to the bankruptcy. That was the, position. That was the, opinion of the Robert Schumann. And the goal of this conference, again, I would like to highlight, is to deliver proposals and recommendations for shaping European Union model to stop tendencies towards the super state. So we hope, to have a very interesting opinion of our great speakers from around Europe, from many countries. And our speaker, I would like to welcome Dr. Margriet Kritenburg from Netherlands. She is from Hague University of Applied Science, and she is an author of an excellent book, about, Schumann's Europe. The book, which I think, it's drawing a very nice and objective, perspective and understanding of really what Schumann wanted to do. And over a few decades after Schumann died, we were very aware about what were his goals. But after a few decades, this was forgotten. So there are many, people who don't like to remind, to teach, basically about that very excellent fundamentals Schumann created. And Dr. Kritenburg, is one of the excellent, missionaries and scientists, and as well, fans of Robert Schumann, because this idea was very fruitful after the war. The Schumann was very successful, creating different, practical projects which were of the very importance for the entire Europe. So, dear Dr. Margriet, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Krysiak, for your kind words also. And first of all, I would say thank you, Robert Schumann, because without Robert Schumann, there would not be a European Union. We would not sit here. life would be completely different. And then also I want to say thank you to all of here present and also all the people that are perhaps watching at this very moment. Thank you very much for attending this conference, because now I have an enormous challenge and chance to speak about Robert Schuman as a role model for politicians, and also about his frame of reference to help to solve today's crisis. I need not go further into those crises, I think, at this very moment, but I will do so later on if time's left. Then the first thing that I would like to do, it will be like an extended speech, because I have so many things to say. Still, there will be a kind of warming up, a short warming up, and then I will speak about Schumann's story. And the great input that his ideas have for Europe today, as I just said. My name is, as you just heard, Margriet Krijtenberg, and I'm a senior lecturer at the Hague University of Applied Sciences. I defended my thesis on Schumann's Europe, his frame of reference, at Leiden University in 2012. And the book is translated also into French and converted into a children's book in 6 different languages. Now, we go to the next slide, and it says, the father of Europe, his thoughts are revolutionary topical. What do I mean by that? Well, why? Well, there has never, ever been such a long period of peace among the European Union member states. And that is what we many times forget. And how came this about? Thanks to the Schumann Declaration. And what is the quid of the Schumann Declaration? Well, that it is about reconciliation between the arch enemies, Germany and France, after more than 1,000 years of war. Since the Treaty of Verdun, there had been always war between what is now Germany and France. And then also that those arch enemies started, imagine, a peace project together as equal partners, using the instruments of war, coal and steel, as instruments of peace. Then they put it on a supranational level, so that war between those 2 countries and other countries that would like to join and that were democratic would never have war. War would become impossible. This is an idea that, or more than an idea, it is a frame of reference that also today can be highly inspirational. We need this kind of thinking, of having an attitude of reconciliation, of effective solidarity, of being equal partners, of working towards supranationality only where needed, and to safeguard as much as possible the own interest of each country and of each region. Then also, sometimes you hear, but Schumann, you know, that was then. That was, 1950, Schumann Declaration. Yes, it was then, but also then it was a very dangerous time. We had the threat of communism. We had the threat of a 3rd World War. We lost more or less all of our colonies. When you say we, you speak about Europe. So it was really a very tense situation. And of course, Europe was one big misery. So something had to be done. What had to be done with Germany? The German question was difficult to solve. And then this way that Schumann solved not only Schumann, of course, there were more founding fathers, but the main idea comes from Schumann's mind and heart. And that brought about exactly that complete twist, so that it went towards peace and an everlasting peace. Well, everlasting, we hope that it will maintain itself. Okay, then we go to the next slide. Europe today. Yeah, at the same time, you know, I think we could be happy in the sense that Europe today is a wake-up call. Yes, we are shaken. We have to do something because we were in a kind of, routine. And it's good to break the routine. So this is what is going to happen right now. And then this is also one of the first questions that I ask my students of the Hague University of Applied Sciences. Who started the first peaceful revolution in Europe? When you ask it about India, everybody says, Gandhi. When you say it about Europe, silence in the court. Nobody says anything. Hardly anybody knows Schumann, because it was Schumann with the Schumann Declaration. Without Schumann Declaration, no Europe. How did he start it? Okay, we know the Schumann Declarations on the 9th of May. And why? What is the main aim of European integration? Many times we also forget that and we think that's the economics, that's the internal market. No, it is peace and security. That is the main aim. The economy is meant to serve the human being, to serve society. Politics is also meant to serve, to organize society, to protect the people. They are meant to serve. So that is what can be said about all these topics that I just mentioned here, all these points. And then, okay, here, this is the warming up. EU in its good days. We know the Nobel Prize, or the Nobel Prize, it's how you want to pronounce it. That was in 2012, because of the long period of peace. We can travel everywhere and so on. I think you all know. Now we are in this European Union, the Russia-Ukraine war. COVID, Brexit, gas, you name it, populism, migration, climate, terrorism. Okay, so there is enough to do in this Europe, and it's only a few things that I just mentioned. So we see the both sides. This is a famous image, I think you all know it, of the beautiful young lady and the not so beautiful old lady. Yeah, so this is exactly what happens with Europe, the European paradigm. So EU, what to do? EU is suffering from a cataract, you could say. You cannot see it very well anymore. What should Europe do? To focus on its main aim, peace and security. Well, then Schumann said, world peace cannot be safeguarded without the making of creative efforts proportionate to the dangers which threaten it. I just mentioned them at the beginning. Huge dangers. So something else had to be done. What had to be done? Reconciliation followed by effective solidarity. Working together. And that is the way we also have to think nowadays. And I hope I still have time to solve in that sense the problem of migration. Then, so how did Schumann do this? The inauguration of a new kind of politics. That was supranationality. Because supranationality was something completely new in world history. There is no organization like the European Union, because the European Union also has the power to demand that things should be followed up. Okay, we also have the danger of the super power, that super state that Europe is not meant to be. Then we have this. Where is a Schumann or an Adenauer today? Well, perhaps he or she is sitting in this room. Or perhaps one of the people that are watching are this Schumann or Adenauer. Anybody, everybody. If you try to be a really good citizen and so on and so forth, there is a great possibility that you contribute highly to a peaceful Europe. Every year we organize at the Hague University of Applied Sciences a Schumann Congress. It's called the Annual International Schumann Student Congress. The title is Schumann, SC between brackets, Human Solidarity, because that's what is at the focus of everything. Students learn about Schumann. They look through Schumann's lens at EU today and come up with solutions. And those solutions are presented in the congresses. And then we have a debate. It works very well. Very well. People love it. Also, another thing that we do with students to foster this thought of Schumann is we go with them to primary schools, elementary schools, and then they speak about Schumann for kids. They use the booklet, the thesis, PhD thesis, that is translated or converted into a children's book. Students love it, and the kids love it also. So I can tell you endlessly about all those things, but I will leave it. Because now we enter into the Schumann story. Schumann was born in 1886 in Luxembourg. The the amazing thing is that he was born a German. Why? Because his father was from Lorraine. And what happened with Lorraine? Alsace-Lorraine, French, German, French, German, French, German. The Franco-German War of 1870-71, the one with Bismarck, was won by Bismarck. So it became German territory. So Schumann's father became from French-German. He married his mother, who was from Luxembourg, who then also became German. So Schumann is born a German. He is from a conflictive border region. We can say. Here we see it also on the map. He studied law in Germany. He did his PhD in Strasbourg, right here, this place. That was then Germany. Can you imagine? He belonged to Germany. He did it brilliantly. He became a lawyer. And then what happened in 1911? A really very sad accident in his personal life. His mother died by an accident. His father had died already when he was 9 years old. This was a crucial moment in his personal life. He wondered if he had to become a priest. Can you still follow what I'm saying? Is it going too fast, perhaps? Okay. So, but then there was a friend of his, Henry Eschbach. The last names are many times German-like in Alsace-Lorraine. He said, no, Schumann, you have to remain a lawyer. The saints of the future will be saints in suit. Schumann took it to heart because he lived the virtues heroically. And at this very moment, he is in a process of canonization, and he is already declared venerable. That is the first step. Then we have the First World War. Even before the First World War, Schumann already had this idea, I want peace on the European continent. How can we achieve peace? Reconciliation. Reconciliation is his keyword. Only through reconciliation. Okay, still, we had the First World War. What happened after the First World War with Alsace-Lorraine? It returned to France. What happened with Schumann's nationality? He became from German, French. And then also, he was elected by the population of Lorraine, of Moselle, La Moselle, to represent them in the central government in Paris. There he got a task to adapt the laws of Alsace-Lorraine to the laws of the central government. And this is where the subsidiarity comes in. He thought we need not give in with laws that are not necessary absolutely. Because those beautiful social laws that Bismarck had introduced, they wanted to keep them. They also had religion at public schools. They wanted to keep it. And like that, there were more things. So he came up with what's called the Lex Schumann. And everybody was happy. People in Paris, in the rest of France, and the people in Alsace-Lorraine. So this is a beautiful way of dealing with problems that the EU today also can use very, very well. Okay, then I continue, and I also say that even, imagine, so he was elected parliamentarian in the central government, and what did he do after the Treaty of Verdun, the Treaty of Versailles, which was a treaty of revenge? We need to start a policy of reconciliation. Well, can you imagine? I mean, it's your arch-enemy, who killed thousands of people of your own country. I mean, it's quite something. Okay, sorry, I should have said this already. This is also something that I just want to point out, that Schumann had a great interest in Thomas of Aquinas. He is a Catholic theologian and philosopher who wrote the Summa Theologica, and he learned from Thomas of Aquinas a lot about this reconciliation, the conciliatory method. Look for what binds. Focus on the positive of every person, of every country. See how you can work together. See how you can come to this effective solidarity. Then a lot of negativity will not even appear. And if it appears, you have this appreciative dialogue and you try to come to a solution. Even if then you don't agree, respect each other's differences. And this is what he learned from Thomas of Aquinas a lot. And another thing is the subsidiarity principle, which is also hidden in, well, not hidden, but okay, it's in Thomas Aquinas' way of thinking. So all this, I mentioned it already, I just continue. Schumann was also, so we can say he was a man of his conflictive border region. He was a man of faith, because Catholic faith had a lot of influence on him. He was a man of his political circumstances. Here we see Hitler, Nazism, and we see the communism that treats you like a marionette. I need not go into that further, I suppose, but we had the Second World War. Just before the Second World War, Schumann was chosen, say, Under-Secretary of Refugees. And then he was the first parliamentarian to be caught by the Gestapo. He was for 7 months in prison, and then he was sent on house arrest. This is his leitmotif that he wrote to a friend when he was on house arrest. And this is, I think, this is Schumann, you know? We are all instruments, however imperfect, of a providence who uses them to accomplish grand designs which surpass us. And we have to be modest and so on and so forth. But so this is not only for him, he looked at other people also like that. We are all instruments, however imperfect, nobody is perfect, of a providence who uses them to accomplish grand designs which surpass us. Every person can do an enormous amount of good. We are all jewels that have to be polished, you know, through life. Then I'm just telling still of the war. He was caught by the Gestapo, he was in prison, he was put on house arrest, and he escaped. When he escaped, he kept on talking about the need for reconciliation. There was an enormous amount of money on his head, wanted by the Nazis, wanted. He's not caught. So he survived all that, and he kept on speaking about the need for reconciliation. After the Second World War, he became Minister of Finance. As you can imagine, the financial situation was horrible in Europe after the Second World War. He, though, with his L'Inventaire Schumann, he wanted transparency. Where is the money everywhere in the country? I want to know. This should be solved. And he solved the problem. Of course, it was still a problem, but I mean, it became clear. Then he became Prime Minister. When he was Prime Minister, the Marshall Plan was introduced to uplift this horrible economic misery of Europe. So Europe was rebuilt economically. We also had the Congress of The Hague in 1948 with Churchill as president. And then from that, we got the Council of Europe here in Strasbourg and the Court of European Human Rights. So he was involved in many things. And also, okay, now he will become Minister of Foreign Affairs, I will talk about that. But just before that, he got already in touch with the Chancellor from West Germany, that was Adenauer. And with the Prime Minister of Italy, De Gasperi. And the three of them are three people, all three of a conflictive border region. All three of them had German as their native language. All three of them were convinced Catholics. All three of them had a similar professional position. All three of them thought that what binds Europe together, and this is essential, is the spiritual and cultural European heritage. What is this spiritual and cultural European heritage? Well, that is the Greek-Roman tradition, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, all these people, you know, and the Jewish-Christian roots. You can be an atheist. Still, these roots are in everything. They are in our educational system, they are in our law system, they are in our care system. Then we see there also Jean Monnet. Jean Monnet was the head of the plan committee, French planning committee. He was very much needed also. He was also got a lot of the ideas that Schumann had already about how can this be solved through reconciliation, through Schumann's collaborator, Reuter, he was called. And he liked those ideas very much. He put them on paper. This is an abbreviated version. He put them on paper and that became the Schumann Declaration. The Schumann Declaration was on the 9th of May. Okay, I'm going very fast now because I'm afraid the time is urging. So, the roots of European unification, we need to be aware of our specifically European common patrimony, and we need to have the will to safeguard and develop it. The European spirit signifies being conscious of belonging to a culture family and to have a willingness to serve that community in the spirit of total mutuality, without any hidden motives of hegemony or the selfish exploitation of others. Our century, the 20th, that has witnessed the catastrophes resulting in unending clash of nationalities and nationalisms, look what's happening now, must attempt and succeed in reconciling nations in a supranational association. This would safeguard the diversities and aspirations of each nation while coordinating them in the same manner as the regions are coordinated within the unity of the nation. I don't think this needs any explanation. This was even before the Schumann Declaration that he said all these things, and they are all incorporated in the Schumann Declaration. I'm not going to say all this because, of course, as Minister of Foreign Affairs, he also signed for the NATO. All the other things I think I mentioned already. Core values and principles, pivotal role of man with his transcendence, which means man is a social being. You know, we are not alone in this world, and there is more to life than just living it. Forgiveness and reconciliation, be open to forgiveness. Effective solidarity means solidarity with deeds. Subsidiarity means don't help more than needed. If people can do it themselves, let them do it themselves. And supranationality, only where needed. So don't impose itself. So this was all done then. And then here is Schumann's warning, which I think is extremely topical also. This whole cannot and must not remain an economic and technical enterprise. What is it these days? What could we say? An economic and technical enterprise, in many ways. Okay, we also have beautiful examples of solidarity. Yeah, I'm saying that also. But okay, but the economics, internal market is guiding the EU a little bit too much, I could say. It needs a soul, the conscience of its historical affinities and of its responsibilities, in the present and in the future, and a political will at the service of the same human ideal. We need to do this with baby steps. You can't give beef to a baby. The baby will vomit. You start with milk. Little by little, people have to get used to it. Start through education, inform the people. The European, it started with the European the ECSC, for coal and steel, and that was completely new in European history and in world history. So it is like ducks that just have to swim. There was a journalist asking Schumann, what do we have to think of this Schumann Declaration? Un saut dans l'inconnu, a leap in the unknown. We will see. It was known as the bomb Schumann because it made a huge impact. Solidarity principle. We shall have to replace all the tendencies inherited from the past with the notion of solidarity. That is to say, the conviction that the real interest of all lies in acknowledging and accepting the interdependency of all. Egoism does not pay anymore. Very good, very good. Egoism does not pay anymore. What he said about Africa, as soon as the production in Europe is more or less okay after the Second World War, we should take care of Africa. We should take care of their economy, that it gets going. If we had done so, the people wouldn't have come here in search of work and so on and so forth, because they would have their own economy flourishing. You know? And this is one of the ways in which we can fight migration, but I know more effective ways even, I think I want to mention them. Brotherhood beyond borders. What Europe wants is to uplift the rigidity of its borders. They should become the lines of contact where the material and cultural exchanges take place. They define the particular tasks, responsibilities and innovations proper to each country, taking into account as well the problems, listen, all countries together and even the continents face, and thus foster solidarity. This means that the common good, the individual is hugely important, but always in connection with the common good. And also the European common good should be in connection with the universal common good. It cannot be that people are dying of hunger while we are having here a big feast, you know? This is not a way that it should really work. So, the topicality of Schumann's Europe and his frame of reference, it gives an insight in the reason of current problems, I think, because we are showing now solidarity altogether against Russia or something like that, but I mean, this is not the solidarity I'm speaking about. I'm speaking about solidarity that with deeds, what are you doing to help out the misery of other people and so on and so forth. And it shows a possible way out. I'm giving you already an example, the migration that I just mentioned, because I'm teaching at the University of Applied Sciences, which I love to tell you the truth. So, when we have this science of Schumann, this frame of reference, then if we think, for example, of the huge floods that we have these days in Pakistan, in Suriname, we also have them often in Bangladesh, and I don't know where. Okay, I come from Holland, I'm from the Netherlands. I know we have this wonderful delta works. The EU, it will cost the EU, it will cost the Netherlands a lot to get that kind of delta works working in countries like Pakistan, Suriname, Bangladesh, so that those problems, those floods are no longer possible and people can stay there. At the same time, it solves the environmental migrants' problem to come all the way from there to Europe to think, oh, please give us a home. And we don't have the home, or we don't want to give them the home, which is really not nice. So we have to invest in solving problems also of other people if we have the knowledge. I also have about desertification. I know we also have the technical knowledge to make infertile grounds fertile. Let's do that, even if it costs us an enormous amount. That way, where is desert or whatever, where the ground is completely, infertile, we can make it fertile. People stay where they are, and they are happy. They want to stay in their own culture, in their own country, and so on and so forth. Of course, there will always be refugees because of war, because of conflicts and all those things. But even for that, I could give you an example, but I'm not going to give it because there's no time. This Europe, which is still split up and torn, continues to be ever more aware of its calling to become the heart of a pacific cooperation of all peoples and of all races at the service of a humanity that embraces all continents. I think this is so beautiful. We need this paradigm shift, and the paradigm shift is that we really try to think with an attitude of understanding, reconciliation, focus on the positive, come to effective solidarity, use subsidiarity and only supranationality where really, really needed. I have here, but I think I stop here because if not, I take too much time. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Margaret Kritenbuch, for that very clear bringing us over main, I think, ideas, statements of the concept of Robert Schuman. So you will have opportunity later on as well extend some topics you would like to do. And it was very good, I think, introduction to the other speakers, to the speakers who are going to hesitate many other issues related to the Schuman concept. And now I would like to invite for a speech Professor Tomasz Grosse, who is a professor at Warsaw School of Economics, professor at Warsaw University, and he is a member of the Committee of the Regions at the European Union. And we ask Professor we put a following question. I hope we get some insight from your side, Professor Grosse. So the question is, does the economic model of European Union enables the convergence of the potentials, the members of the community? So Robert Schuman was just, thinking about that the European Union or the European community will take care about equal development of all countries, of all members, right? So the question is how the things are currently going. So Professor Grosse, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. I hope I am heard. First of all, thank you very much for invitation to this conference, and focusing on my basic topic, which is the process of convergence among member states, which is could be defined as a convergence between the richest and the poorest members of the EU, of European community. So basically, we would say that previously we had important institutions which could support the convergence. I mean, for instance, structural funds and cohesion policy, which was such an instrument, highly important to narrowing the gap, economic as well as social gaps among poorer and richer member states. We would raise a question if previous model, only based on cohesion policy, is or was enough to achieve convergence. Because if we witness economic processes on the common market, we would come into conclusion that only cohesion policy funds are not enough instrument or not appropriate instrument to achieve full convergence among member states. In addition, I think we had some public policies or economic structures or processes which make the convergence even more difficult. First of all, it is currency union, which is not appropriately designed and make economic processes of convergence more difficult, particularly from the point of view of weaker, more indebted southern countries of the EU, of the currency union. The second public policy, highly important in the EU, is energy or climate policy, which also was designed to the detriment of countries which based economy on coal. So we have some problems, and the climate policy is another example of public policy in the EU, which could bring about a divergence between countries, not convergence. But today we are in quite different reality. So it is not only discussion about cohesion policy, appropriateness of that policy, or climate policy, deficiencies of that policy, but we are involved in deep consecutive crisis. First of all, energy crisis, which is highly dangerous for the whole economy, but also for society, raises inflation, and could also inject food crisis in the EU, and also has some negative impact both on Eurozone economic stability, as well as could exchange with climate policy, bringing about some negative or even more negative consequences. So the problem, the most important problem is related to current crises and how the EU, the European institution, could respond to those crises. Unfortunately, the response to the crisis by the European Commission and other European institutions is generally slow, weak, and this response is inadequate to the challenges we face. So it is a deep problem that this response, the political response for those crises, is not even weak and late, but also could bring about some differences, economic disparities among member states. Some of the projects we have observed proposed recently by, for instance, European Commission, could add another burdens for some countries. So it is rather not a way to escape from crisis, but rather to make divergence among member states in the EU more severe. So, in addition to those experiences, we have, which was created by the EU itself, in my opinion. I mean, the crisis related to law and European, so-called European values. Under the guise of rule of law, for instance, European funds coming, for instance, from European Recovery Fund were suspended to Poland. And currently we have in Poland discussion, political debate, public debate, how to escape, how to give up participation in that project, that program in European Recovery Fund. And it is not only a problem for Poland, but in my opinion, even more dangerous process for member countries, member states of the currency union from southern part of Europe. Because European Recovery Fund was designed not to support Poland or weaker states from the eastern part of the EU, but rather was designed to support the weakest countries in the EU. If Poland withdraw from a European Recovery Fund, it would hit Southern Europe and destabilize weak structures of currency union. So, in conclusion, of course, it is dangerous process from the point of view of potential convergence between member states. So, my conclusion is that on the one hand, we have very severe consecutive crises in the EU. On the other hand, we have very weak, even bad responses for those to those crises by the European institutions. And European institutions added some new crises, some new problems to this environment, difficult situation of European integration and for the EU. All of those processes make member states a distant target. Rather, I expect stronger processes of divergence in the EU. And what is even more important, I can see some kind of interrelation between political problems, political divisions between member states and growing likelihood of divergence in the EU. First of all, for instance, the rule of law crisis brought about huge political divisions among member states. So it undermined solidarity and friendship among member states, particularly between frugal, so-called frugal and poorer countries in Europe. So if we have growing tension and growing political divisions among political elite in Europe, and at the same time growing Eurosceptic mood in right-wing conservative voters, among right-wing conservative voters, it is more difficult to have real solidarity among member states. So it is our quickest way to disintegration in Europe. So my final conclusion is that rather than convergence, economic convergence, we have on the one hand a more likely scenario related to divergence, and plus strong political divisions, quarrels, some kind of disagreements, but very deep, which could result in disintegration the same way like Brexit some time ago. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Grosse, and stay with us. Later on, we are going to be engaged in the discussion after all speakers are expressing their thoughts. And now I would like, to invite for a speech Professor Pablo de la Fuente from Spain, and Professor is basically asked to respond following question. So what changes are needed for the European institutions to operate in the attitude of service and not as rulers? So Professor de la Fuente, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. You can listen me. Wait a second, I connect the camera.
Professor de la Fuente, we cannot see you. If you can activate your, your
yes,
camera.
I try to do it, but I don't know what's the matter. Wait a second, please. I'm not able to, doesn't allow me to activate the. Are you able to see me?
Welcome, Professor de la Fuente. So start your speech, please.
Yes, but do you listen me?
Yes, excellent. So go ahead.
Thank you. This is a little bit complicated for me. Well, thank you very much for your kind invitation. For me, the question that you asked me is a little bit complicated. I don't have a simple answer to this so many complicated question. Instead to do a long speech about my point of view, in this my first speech, I will try to be brief and expose some points that I think that is very important in order to analyze this important problem. First of all, one thing is the intention of the original intention of Schumann time ago, and now the reality of this dinosaur that is the European Union. There are two historic and political different realities. The ideas of Schumann goes in a way, and the reality of nowadays the European Union is another business. No? Come back to the idea of Schumann is something so difficult that transform a car in an airplane. An engineer can design an airplane. It's difficult. It requires a lot of technicians and tests and a lot of things. But it's more difficult to transform a car in an airplane. And I think this is nowadays, for me, the most important problem, because nowadays the European Union is, in my humble opinion, is the first experiment made by the globalitarians. For me, the globalitarians are this mix of globalists and totalitarians. The globalitarians watch the European Union as the first experiment of a world government. And this is go against powerful people with a lot of money. One way is the change of the balance between political forces in every one of the countries. For example, in the case of my country, in Spain, we have something like the biblical maledictions with the government of Zapatero and Pedro Sánchez and all these guys who give to Spain to be in a few years a power country. But this is not only is not the only condition to change this thing. For example, the future change that perhaps is advanced in Italy in a future. The other point is, in my humble opinion, is the dinosaur, the dragon. How to change this big structure of the European unit. You can change the balance of ideology, but change a structure like the European Union is going against, for example, the bureaucratic resistance of the major officials of the European Union. For me, that is the difficulty. For example, I will do a comment about a project presented by, I'm not a specialist in Copernicus, but some professors in several universities of Poland present a project about the world of Copernicus, no? And the project was rejected because in the project there are not gender perspective, carbon footprint, and the relationship between Copernicus and the global warming. A good idea is stopped with all these criteria. Is go against the beast, is go against the dinosaur. It's not only change. The ideology and the power, two important things, in every one of the partners is also change the beast. And this is very complicated because, I repeat it, the European Union nowadays is the first experiment of global power for the globalitarians. Well, when I listening with attention the first speaker, who has the initial idea of Europe about peace and security. And my question is, what is nowadays the competence of European Union in security? Is nothing, because all the members of the European Union, more or less, we depend on NATO and on the United States. The main goal, one of the main ideas of Schuman nowadays is not represented by the structure of the European Union. The European Union has not mechanism to assure the defense of the partners on the continent. What are the one of the solutions? Well, a few months ago I read a book about the Hanseatic League, no? The Hanseatic League, the historian who wrote this book said that, well, the rules of the Hansa are not clear, the number of members is not an efficient, and we don't have a list with detail with all the members of the Hansa, but was a forum, a supranational organization which during several centuries works very good. I think nowadays the idea of the Hansa as ancient and of previous experiment before the European Union, perhaps learn of the history, can follow a new path. The Hansa was not really a supranational organization. It was like a forum where several city-states debate about common problems. I think that the way in a future is transform this structure more in a forum for talking the states, that instead to create more and more structures and bureaucrats, and that I think is answering a little bit your question, against the original idea of Schuman. This is my first speak and my opinion about that, and perhaps later I can talk about other details, listening the other speakers. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor De La Fuente, for very original approach, interesting insights, right, I think. And stay with us, of course, to attend later on in a discussion. And now I would appreciate a speech of Jean-Philippe Goertz from Germany, from Academy of Valerie. Is he present? Oh, yes. Excuse me, just
Zadaj mi jakieś pytanie, bo nawet wiesz, że mi jakieś pytanie.
So excuse me, we just I tried to overjump, the speaker who is Bogdan Żonca. He's a member of the European Parliament from Poland, and thank you very much for coming. And the question, is just, do you think the European Union model and style of the institution is that one which was basically arising from Schumann idea? So it means, is that how Schumann wanted these institutions acting, and what do you think, what can be changed so that the style of this institution is not going into the superstate, but they style of the actions or operation would be, similar to the style of the serving. So be so kind to respond to that question, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Professor. I think that it will be better that my speech will be on Polish language. Can be? On Polish language?
Yes, of course, please.
Okay.
So we have translation from the Polish into the English and German, I think, right? 3 languages are translated, so go ahead.
Okay. Bardzo dziękuję za to szczególne wyróżnienie, że mogę być z Państwem. Bardzo dziękuję za przyjazd do Strasburga i za podjęcie niezwykle ważnych tematów. Muszę Państwu powiedzieć, że moi asystenci są od początku tutaj z Państwem i informują mnie albo przez telefon, albo przez e-mail, o czym dyskutujecie, więc no niestety jest to dzień pracy więc i dzień głosowań, więc nie mogłem być z Państwem bez przerwy, ale duchowo i merytorycznie jestem, że tak powiem, przygotowany na rozmowę. Bardzo dziękuję za dobrą, bardzo dobrą informację na temat tego, czym miała być Unia Europejska dzięki takim postaciom jak Schumann, de Gasperi, Adenauer. Unia Europejska o tym już zapomniała, niestety, przykro o tym mówić. Unia tworzona przez tamtych wielkich ludzi, przez tamte wielkie postaci była Unią, czy pomysłem na współżycie, na dobre relacje, na solidarne działanie wolnych narodów z wolnymi, równych państw z równymi. Nikt nie mówił o ważniejszych państwach, o mniej ważnych państwach, tylko mówiono o tym, że Unia Europejska może być tym projektem, który pogodzi wiele różnych interesów i doprowadzi do tego, że będzie Unia Europejska takim kontynentem, taką organizacją i takim miejscem na kontynencie europejskim, gdzie będzie można każdą mądrą ideę propagować nie na siłę, nie poprzez przymus. Mówię o tym, używam tego pojęcia przymus dlatego między innymi, że to pojęcie przymusu jest coraz bardziej obecne w Unii Europejskiej. Sankcje, restrykcje, jakieś konsekwencje, które są wprowadzane przez prawodawców Unii Europejskiej, przez na przykład Trybunał Sprawiedliwości Unii Europejskiej. Jeśli czegoś ktoś nie zrobił, to nakładane są kary. Nawet czasem te kary są tak nakładane brutalnie i dramatycznie, jak w przypadku Polski, że wtedy, kiedy mamy rację, bo po prostu nie zamknęliśmy kopalni jednej albo próbowaliśmy obronić własną jakby suwerenność energetyczną, wtedy jeszcze nie było mowy o kryzysie związanym z Putinem i o wojnie na Ukrainie. Wtedy myśmy dostali właśnie te sankcje unijne, o których w ogóle chyba się nie śniło ojcom założycielom. Bo oczywiście ojcowie założyciele wiedzieli, że będą różne postawy, będą różne opinie na temat tego organizmu unijnego. Ale nikt nie zakładał, że będzie przymus, że będą jakieś kary, że będą konsekwencje finansowe. I to jest dzisiaj dosyć dramatyczne, bo widzimy, że w tym projekcie pod nazwą Unia Europejska, forsowanym przez liberałów europejskich na czele z panem Guy Verhofstadtem, Belgiem, który byłym premierem Belgii, który próbuje stworzyć jedno państwo europejskie z jedną konstytucją i mówi wprost, że mniejsze kraje się nie będą liczyć, mniejsze kraje nie będą miały głosu, mniejsze kraje będą mniej ważne, a wszystko, co najważniejsze, będzie się działo przy pomocy liderów z Francji, z Niemiec i tak dalej. My widzimy tutaj dzisiaj, że nasi liderzy w Unii Europejskiej popełnili kolosalne błędy. Nawet dzisiejsze wystąpienie pani von der Leyen, w którym przyznała, że no szkoda, że nie słuchaliśmy Polski. Szkoda, że nie słuchaliśmy Polski, jak polscy politycy mówili, żeby zablokować Nord Stream 2, żeby w ogóle nie budować tego Nord Stream 2, że każda rozmowa z Putinem to jest wpuszczanie barbarzyńcy do ogrodu. kiedy myśmy to mówili 6 razy, próbowaliśmy wywołać debatę w Parlamencie Europejskim na temat Nord Stream 2, nigdy nas nie posłuchano. No ale dzisiaj my, chrześcijanie, musimy to przyjąć, że jeśli się przyznała, to też to trzeba docenić, bo no, tacy jesteśmy jako chrześcijanie i tak myślał Schumann, że jest oczywiście czas, kiedy pracujemy, kiedy popełniamy błędy, no ale jak popełniamy błędy, to wtedy też jest miejsce na przeproszenie, że to a to zrobiliśmy źle. No, padło to dzisiaj z ust pani przewodniczącej von der Leyen, że Polska miała rację. Cieszymy się z tego, natomiast oczywiście na tym nie możemy poprzestać, że ktoś nam przyznał rację, tylko musimy dalej mówić o tym, jakim projektem jest Unia Europejska, jak ta Unia ma wyglądać w następnym pokoleniu naszych dzieci, naszych wnuków. I projekcja Schumana jest cały czas istotna, cały czas ważna. I te słowa jego, że albo Unia Europejska będzie chrześcijańska, albo będzie po prostu dyktatem totalitarnym, one po prostu dzisiaj świetnie wybrzmiewają. Cały czas świetnie wybrzmiewają, więc ponadczasowość Schumana jest absolutnie nie do podważenia. I to jest to, czego my się trzymamy jako EKR, jako grupa polityczna, która gromadzi w sobie 15 stron narodowych, bo tyle jest w EKR-ze. Jesteśmy trochę mali, że tak powiem, w sensie ilościowym, ale w sensie takim eksperckim, w sensie naszego wkładu w dyskusję o tym, czym ma być Unia, jesteśmy bardzo ważni. Mamy ważnych profesorów, ważnych ekspertów z Włoch, z Francji, z Niemiec, także z Hiszpanii i dzięki temu jako EKR cały czas przypominamy Unii Europejskiej na forum Parlamentu, na różnych forach instytucji europejskich, że o co chodziło w Unii Europejskiej i o co chodziło ojcom założycielom. Miał być to kontynent współpracy, miał być to kontynent, czy Unia Europejska jako organizacja miała być miejscem i przestrzenią do dla chrześcijańskich wartości. Tymczasem w tych wartości europejskich, to jest najczęściej w tej chwili używane pojęcie, znika pojęcie, czy właściwie już zniknęło pojęcie wartości chrześcijańskich tu w Unii na forum unijnych instytucji, natomiast pojawia się pojęcie wartości europejskich. Nikt nie wie, co to jest. To nie jest zdefiniowane. Co to są te wartości europejskie? Więc oczywiście my przypominamy, że w tych wartościach chrześcijańskich jest prawo do życia, prawo do godnej śmierci, prawda, i tak dalej. Bardzo się boją takich dyskusji nasi adwersarze. Niemniej jednak nasz głos wybrzmiewa na różnych konferencjach, na różnych spotkaniach. Mamy już nawet tutaj w Brukseli swoich zwolenników. Ja Państwu bym polecił każdy artykuł w zasadzie w tej chwili pana profesora Engelsa. To jest taki belgijski myśliciel, filozof, który pisze, nawet dzisiaj napisał kolejny artykuł o sytuacji w Unii Europejskiej. To jest belgijski myśliciel, który jakby idzie nie z prądem, tylko pod prąd Unii Europejskiej. To jest bardzo ważne, że tu w Belgii jakby rodzi się nowa myśl związana z tym, czym ma być Unia Europejska. I jak mówimy, że i zawsze wracamy do kwestii korzeni, źródeł i mówimy o wiecznym Rzymie i wracamy do rzymskiego prawa, do wkładu Rzymian w tą kulturę śródziemnomorską. Jak wracamy do Greków, którzy mówili poprzez różnego rodzaju postawy filozoficzne o wszelkich wartościach, zdarzeniach, z którymi człowiek ma do czynienia, to my też przypominamy, że i chrześcijaństwo, i katolicyzm jest świetną ofertą. A najlepiej to właśnie profesor Engels napisał, że jak powstał zakon benedyktynów w 529 roku na Monte Cassino, to benedyktyni przepisywali wszystkie księgi starożytnych Greków, także ateistów. Nie bali się. A dlaczego się nie bali? No dlatego się nie bali, że w wolnej dyskusji katolicy, chrześcijanie, ludzie myślący o dobrym rozwoju Europy po prostu nie boją się problemów, nie boją się spostrzeżeń. Natomiast dzisiaj niestety jest tak, że o pewnych rzeczach w ogóle nie wolno mówić. Pewne państwa, niektóre państwa są wyłącznie pokazywane jako państwa, gdzie nie ma niby praworządności. Mówię tu o Polsce, o Węgrzech. Jesteśmy tu niemalże codziennie pokazywani jako te kraje, gdzie w ogóle rządzi jakaś despotia, gdzie nie ma wolności. I oczywiście to jest kłamstwo, to jest przypisywanie cech Polsce, czy Polakom, czy powiedzmy Węgrom, których nie mamy. Zawsze o tym mówię, jak rozmawiam z kolegami z innych krajów, że myśmy w Polsce nigdy nie ścinali króli, tak? Królów, jak stało się to we Francji czy w Anglii. Myśmy byli bardzo otwarci na wszystkie, jako Polska, na wszystkie prądy europejskie. A nawet jak ktoś dobrze życzył Polsce, to z obcych krajów królowie zasiadali na polskim tronie i pomagali Polakom, a my im. Batory, prawda, dynastia Wazów i tak dalej. Więc to pokazujemy, spokojnie pokazujemy tę sytuację w Polsce jako sytuację, która jest ciągle dobrą ofertą dla Unii Europejskiej. Więc kończąc powiem tak, że Unia Europejska w myśli Schumana jest genialnym tworem. Gdybyśmy wykonywali jego myśl, wdrażali, bylibyśmy naprawdę bardzo konkurencyjni gospodarczo. Odstąpiono od tego. Próbuje się teraz stworzyć państwo europejskie z jedną konstytucją. Próbuje się stworzyć takie państwo, w którym ta idea równych z równymi narodów i wolnych z wolnymi państw, ta idea jest po prostu położona na łopatki. Następuje totalne odejście od solidarności europejskiej, totalne odejście od pomocniczości jednego kraju drugiemu krajowi w Unii Europejskiej. Są slogany, są takie różnego rodzaju powiedzonka, jak to się mówi, że cały czas musi być więcej Unii Europejskiej w Unii. Nikt nie wie, o co chodzi w takim założeniu, że są wartości europejskie. Nie wiemy, co to jest te wartości. My mówimy, że są wartości chrześcijańskie. Coś jest dobrego albo coś jest złego. Ktoś jest dobry albo ktoś jest zły. I to jest czytelne, to jest oczywiste. Natomiast w Unii niestety tworzy się taka grupa osób, która by chciała zbudować to państwo europejskie. I na koniec powiem Państwu taką rzecz, że musi nastąpić jakaś reforma Unii Europejskiej i ona musi nastąpić także w duchu Schumana, w tym duchu solidarnych z solidarnymi. Jestem przekonany, że nie ma innej drogi niż tworzenie wśród 27 państw teraz, wśród takiej nowej solidarności, ale w duchu Schumana, że każdy mały kraj jest tak samo ważny jak wielki kraj, że nie może być wykorzystywania jednego kraju przez drugi, żerowania czy powiedzmy osiągania zysków ekonomicznych poprzez wykorzystywanie drugiego kraju. I te instytucje unijne, które w tej chwili są, głównie mówi się o Parlamencie Europejskim, który nie jest dzisiaj najważniejszy, ale lewica i liberałowie bardzo by chcieli, żeby Parlament Europejski był najważniejszą instytucją. My się temu sprzeciwiamy. Cały czas uważamy, że najważniejszym organem Unii Europejskiej jest Rada Europejska, czyli spotkania premierów, prezydentów, bo oni przywożą tutaj do Brukseli czy do Strasburga informacje o tym, czego chce jego kraj. Obojętnie, czy to jest polityk z lewicy, czy z prawicy, czy tam ze środka, to jednak on reprezentuje jakąś większość i on powinien decydować, mówiąc o tym na arenie unijnej, decydować, co chce jego kraj, co dla jego kraju byłoby najlepsze. Więc uważam, że trzeba iść w tym kierunku, żeby premierzy, prezydenci krajów Unii Europejskiej byli tym najważniejszym ciałem w Unii Europejskiej. Parlament Europejski powinien być ważny, ale powinien no nawet niektórzy moi koledzy profesorowie także mówią, że powinien być zlikwidowany, że nie powinno być Parlamentu Europejskiego, bo on gmatwa sytuację w Unii Europejskiej. Może to jest daleko idący wniosek, ale jakbyśmy dopuścili do sytuacji, że Parlament Europejski będzie najważniejszy, ja jestem jego lojalnym członkiem, że jak Parlament Europejski będzie najważniejszy, to będzie to po prostu koniec państw narodowych, będzie to koniec tej starej Europy, i tego starego Rzymu, tej starej tradycji, bo nałożą nam wszystkim nowy gorset, powiedzą, że historia Europy zaczęła się, nie wiem, w 2023 roku, że tamta historia jest nieważna i to będzie, że tak powiem, no, ogromny dramat, bo to nowe pokolenie, które rośnie w tej chwili, czy wyrośnie na takim fałszywym gruncie, po prostu nie będzie wiedziało, skąd się w ogóle wzięło. Będzie masa europejska, będzie jakiś tłum europejski, będą jacyś politycy, którzy mówią, że głównym prawem europejskim jest, czy główną wartością europejską jest aborcja, eutanazja, bo to się mieści w tych wartościach europejskich. Więc czeka nas jakiś dramat, gdyby tak się stało. No ale będą wybory, proszę Państwa, za 1,5 roku, w maju przyszłego roku. Jest dobry prognostyk, bo prawdopodobnie w Szwecji prawica wygrała. Być może we Włoszech za kilka dni wygra również prawica. Więc jakby nastąpi takie przebudzenie się tych konserwatystów europejskich, lepsze zorganizowanie się konserwatystów europejskich i wtedy stworzymy tą Unię, o której myślał De Gasperi, czy Adenauer, czy oczywiście Schumann. Tą Europę w oparciu o wartości chrześcijańskie. Dziękuję bardzo.
Panie pośle, bardzo dziękuję za ciekawe wystąpienie. No to wystąpienie wykazuje poparcie dla tego siania idei Schumana. Instytut Myśli Schumana sieje od kilku lat i widać, że rodzą się owoce. Również ze Szwecją, z Włochami mamy liczne kontakty, z wieloma narodami też tam spotykamy się, rozmawiamy z różnymi działaczami społecznymi, z politykami. Tutaj też pan wspomniał o książce pana profesora Engelsa. Miałem przyjemność być recenzentem tej książki od strony zagadnień ekonomicznych. I rzeczywiście ona dokonuje bardzo ciekawej analizy, takiej rzetelnej, naukowej analizy, ale analizy odnoszącej się do konkretnych, realnych spraw. I rzeczywiście można by powiedzieć, że tych osób, tych podmiotów myślących w stylu Schumana w Europie mamy znacznie więcej, niż wydaje się, znacznie więcej, niż to być może wynika z przekazów medialnych. A więc poprzez organizowanie takich spotkań, to spotkanie dzisiejsze jest relacjonowane w internecie przez różne też media w języku angielskim, więc tutaj też myślę, że to się przyczyni do tego, żeby te idee Schumana wygrywały, żeby jak najwięcej ludzi dobrej woli właśnie podejmowało to działanie. Schumann, kiedy funkcjonował po wojnie, on nie zadawał pytania, skąd jesteś, czy chodzisz do kościoła, czy nie. On miał tą właściwość łączenia ludzi dobrej woli, czyli ludzi, którzy szanują prawo naturalne, którym zależy naprawdę na relacji, na równowadze, na przyjaźni, partnerstwie. Właśnie akcentował to i dzisiaj nasza szanowna pani doktor Katrin akcentowała też właśnie to, że przede wszystkim te fundamenty, ekonomia, instytucje są ważne, ale jeśli one nie wynikają jeśli ich styl funkcjonowania, tutaj też pan poseł podkreślił to, ich też model nie wynika właśnie z tej, można by powiedzieć, modelu relacji, jaki ma być, tej relacji, w której nie ma przemocy kapitałowej, w której można by powiedzieć, chcemy osiągnąć pewną równowagę gospodarczą. Tu profesor Grosse właśnie wypowiadał się o tym bardzo krytycznie. Doszedł do wniosku, że niestety w tym modelu ekonomicznym Unii Europejskiej my nie idziemy w kierunku konwergencji, czyli zrównywania się potencjałów ekonomicznych poszczególnych krajów. Jest wręcz odwrotnie. I tutaj oczywiście spotykamy się w takim duchu, żeby nie jakby stawać, że tak powiem, w opozycji, tylko właśnie, żeby to, co Schumann też antycypował, żeby po prostu naprawiać ten model, który nie działa poprawnie. Tutaj ja chciałem przypomnieć właśnie Jan Paweł II, który zachęcał nie tylko Polskę, żeby przystąpić właśnie do tej wspólnoty europejskiej. Po co? Jan Paweł II mówił, jesteście potrzebni, żeby właśnie ją kształtować, żeby ją formować. I podkreślał właśnie wtedy, że te fundamenty, też niejako przytaczając w pewnym sensie Schumana, te fundamenty ducha, wartości chrześcijańskich są kluczowe. I Schumann, proszę Państwa, nikogo nie mówiąc na siłę, nie zaganiał do kościoła. Tak? Schumann po prostu tylko podkreślał pewną prawdę. Tu dobrze dziękujemy, panie pośle, że pan przypomniał te tutaj też, czy to też w innych wystąpieniach było, że święty Benedykt, prawda, w V wieku, prawda, podejmował działania właśnie takie, które właśnie tworzyły, budowały tą wspólnotę Europy. Bardzo dobrze pan podkreślił, że nie bał się prawdy naukowej. Bardzo dziękuję przy tym pani doktor obecnej, że pani książka właśnie jest bardzo obiektywna, jest bardzo mocno, rzetelnie postawiona w takim, jest przewodem naukowym, rzetelnym, sięgającym po źródła. I właśnie spójrzmy, że dokonywanie takich analiz, dyskusji właśnie, które nie uciekają od prawdy, one przynoszą dobre owoce. I myślę, że ten trud, przez który przechodzimy właśnie tych dyskusji, rozmów wobec tych, którzy może nie chcą tej prawdy. Niestety przez całe wieki zawsze historia pokazuje, że są ci, którzy są przeciw prawdzie i ci, którzy tę prawdę niosą. Dlatego, panie pośle, jeśli pan będzie mógł oczywiście, to proszę z nami zostać dalej. I dziękujemy za wsparcie, bo tutaj chciałem powiedzieć, że pan poseł bardzo mocno się zaangażował, żeby też te takie możliwości tutaj techniczne, to jest niezwykle ważne, też właśnie po to, żebyśmy mogli właśnie tu przybyć, ale też w tym roku jest tak, że jest transmisja tego właśnie w internecie, w różnych miejscach. I już dzisiaj ja przed chwilą dostałem też różne informacje, pozytywne reakcje właśnie na temat tego spotkania. W kolejnym wystąpieniu bardzo prosimy pana Jean-Philippe Goertz z Akademii Valery z Niemiec. I tutaj pan dostał takie wyzwanie. So Jean-Philippe Goertz, I would like to ask the question, how should look like the economic solidarity in the European community? If you would like, to, respond to that question and present your opinion, we would be very glad. So you are with us. Mr. Jean-Philippe Goetz.
Yes,
And,
thank you very much.
Thank you very
Professor
much. The
Krysiak.
floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for organizing this honorable meeting and the opportunity to speak here, and to the other speakers for their interesting contributions. My name is Jan-Philipp Goetz. I'm a lawyer and former executive for Lufthansa German Airlines with experience in France, the United States, Belgium, Poland, as well as the German Army, NATO, and the United Nations in Africa. I also need to leave at 5:30 around to pray the rosary in front of the German Chancellery, as we have done every Wednesday since November, and as are doing tens of thousands of other Europeans every Wednesday and Thursday in their countries. I'm stepping in for Richard Schütze, who has a stomach flu and sends his apologies. I cannot speak here like he would have, especially at very short notice. I got to know of this at around noon, and I was in a meeting myself. So let me maybe add some general remarks from the heart of a Catholic lover of Europe and a German patriot. I quite frankly would feel unable to speak of any institutionalized European solidarity before the experience of the coming winter. When I left lobbying in 2017, I already felt that people in the institutions were overwhelmed and our institutions generally had lost their grip in reality. This is actually the reason why I left. Now this seems to be even more so. I think many things will change and shift. However, a general answer to European solidarity and your question is this: subsidiarity and personal responsibility. Look after your family, your friends and your neighbors, your town and your church. And if you haven't done that in the last few years, then you're part of the problem. If you've done it, you're already part of the solution. Solidarity, like any other good, must be personal. And it cannot be outsourced, and it cannot be given to a European or even a national level if not at the same time you take care of solidarity around you. And then once we've done that, we'll take it from there. Let me maybe quickly add some general comments on Europe and on the work that Schumann is doing, and which I think is very good and very valuable and important work. And I hope that we will get to copy these things or also start our own initiatives in other European countries like that, or at least we bring them together. My own Valere Academy, Values, Leadership, Responsibility, certainly is very indebted to Schumann, but also to the whole idea of Christian personalism. So where are we right now? How did we get here? And how do we go on quickly in hopefully 7 minutes? So where are we? We are in the middle of the jungle. And to be honest, I believe it's 5 minutes past 12. So all the discussions about how to reform the European institutions, I think this is too late. But it may be good for something in the future. And so this conference and everything you do is not for waste, but it will not be applied within the next 12 months because we will have different problems. So we can as well relax, be calm and patient, because we have lost our way and we need to be rescued. We will not plan or fight our way out of this situation. If there's a future at all, then we will see the fruits of our labors maybe in 30 years, and the first signs maybe in 5 or 10 years. So let's be realistic. This has taken quite some time to walk down into the valley, and it'll take probably even more time up. If there's no future, then let's just get ready for Armageddon. And both options are possible, and they require the same action. So that's good. How do we get here? I'm a Westerner. I was born in 1970. I experienced the whole end of the Cold War just like a big victory. And so I think we all believed we started believing in our own lies, namely that we as mankind, or especially Western mankind, create the good future, and that we had won the war with principles of democracy and capitalism and markets and especially law and freedom. However, law and freedom to be defined by man himself. So what we had as a philosophy was full-scale individualism and materialism, and that's not very different from Marxism and collectivism, actually, because we actually believed in processes and rules, that they had won the war, not people. And our whole materialism tends to nihilism, and So that's where we are. Mix into this. And don't forget the sexual and the digital revolution, because they're both major revolutions that are probably bigger than the French and the Russian revolutions. We talk about these revolutions a lot, but we are in the midst of major revolutions. They are not just tiny side developments. Think of the millions of aborted children, for example. That is like major wars being waged right now. And so we're in the middle of a revolution, and we're fighting revolutionary wars. Absent from our modern vision was painful responsibility, suffering, and sacrifice, learning from tradition. And I've studied at the best universities in the United States, in France and Germany, and tradition or long-term perspectives were really absent. Any kind of real objective sense or even discussion about objective sense of life, absent. Most importantly, no personalized God and no personalized evil. So no devil. And we lived like happy bears in the Jungle Book. And but the world is not the Jungle Book by Disney, but it's rather Jurassic Park. And there are dinosaurs to haunt us, even inside each one of us. And with this, I think we stepped into a mixture of hubris, which ultimately leads to being overwhelmed, confused, and afraid. And 3 examples of this hubris are the climate change war, the corona war, and the war for world freedom and human rights everywhere, but not at home. All these are wars for impersonal goods, and as such, they are things that are simply too big for us. We overestimate humanity and we underestimate our own responsibility as individuals and our abilities. So how do we go on? Well, I think we should realize that our problems have little to do with external enemies. They also have little to do with Brussels and a lot with ourselves and the quality of our peoples and our friends and our families and our churches and towns and communities. Last week, I was made aware of the work of a British ethnologist of the last century, actually pretty well known, J.D. Unwin, and he remarked after studying the rise and fall of 86 cultures throughout history that first goes premarital chastity, then goes the belief in God, and then goes the ability for rational thought. And this process takes 3 generations. I was actually stunned when I heard this, and I believe it's true for our time. So what do we need to do? We need to get our own role in sexual order in order, meaning fulfill our roles, abstain and stay sober and truthful, take responsibility for another human being of the opposite sex, and to a family. Second, we have to pray together. And prayer mostly means to say thank you, and we need to be grateful. We have forgotten to be grateful. Grateful to our families, to our nations, and to God. And the churches must be filled on Sundays. So on Sundays is a day of worship. It's not the day of shopping. It's a day for God, and we need to set it aside, and each one of us has to do it, and there's nothing more important. When I see parties, political parties meeting on Sunday without an opportunity to actually go to the service, that's wrong, especially as Christian parties also in Germany are doing. Third, and finally, as Christians, we need to be aware that barring miracles, we will not win on a battlefield. We will not win in public media or even in parliaments because we are less than 10% of the population in Europe. We must be different in a way where numbers do not count. If we just act like everybody else, killing, vaccinating, fighting, etc., then we're just giving witness to the enemy's message. We can only give witness by suffering and forgiving in a saintly way. This is what the original Christians did, and that is what will make converts, because that is actually proof of a supernatural faith. And once we are maybe 15% of the population, then I think that will turn the tide. And you can just make the math yourself, what you think is a realistic time frame for us to be 15% of the European population. I believe we are capable, and we are actually well trained. We have suffered from the digital tribulation. We have suffered from the immorality of our surroundings, the madness. We've been ashamed for our institutions, our state, and our church. We are attacked by a barrage of pornography and dirtiness. Yet we have not given up. And here we are. And we may just be better and better prepared and protected than we think we are, which is actually a good place to be and to start from, to be surprised in a good way. Let me end on a positive note. Marshall McLuhan, the great thinker of the digital and media, became a Catholic in his 30s in the last century. And he said, as a Catholic, I'm neither an optimist nor a pessimist. I'm an apocalyptic. I expect the worst, but in the worst, I hope for the best. Thank you very much.
Jean-Philippe, thank you very much indeed for your speech. You expressed many very important and deep things which relate to that, fundaments arising from Robert Schumann. And it proves, your speech, your nationality, right? You are German, right? We have many nations speaking today. Proves that there are many people around Europe, thinking in, similar to that what Schumann was basically promoting. And it seems to be that this people of a goodwill are everywhere. We just need, to speak up. We just need to communicate and say that, this is what really everybody dreams about. Is that what you taught in your very short speech? So thank you very much indeed. And the purpose of that conference, the purpose of the Institute of Schumann Thought activity is just to integrate people around Europe who are on the same page. Following Schumann. So we would like, as well, integrating this, society, people create some certain, integrated movement and raise the voice, communicating that we are not just in minority. There is probably more than 50% of us who thinks, like Schumann was approaching. So again, thank you very much indeed. If you can just stay with us. So the next speaker is Professor Rodrigo Balestar from Hungary. He's a professor at the Matthias Corvinus Collegium. So I put the question to challenge you, following question. What changes are needed in the model of European Union institutions and regulations to stop building the super state? So, Professor, the floor is yours. Are you with us? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I am. Krzysiak, many thanks for this initiative, for inviting us, the Matthias Corvinus Collegium in Budapest. Quickly, to the point, so that I can stick to the time, to the 10 minutes. As some of the speakers said before, the EU now is on the edge of a schism. I naively thought 6 months ago that the war, the Russia's aggression will bring unity, common sense, and pragmatism to the European Union. And far from it, actually the messianism and the will to impose an unspoken top-down federalism actually doubled down. We could see it this morning. For example, in the debate following the speech on the State of the Union of President von der Leyen, especially some of the comments of, MEPs, which are actually very, very clear and seem to imply that there's only one way of being European, theirs. What changes are needed in the European Union? This is indeed the question that you asked me. Some dream of a new convention of treaty changes. I don't. Von der Leyen does. I don't think it's a very good idea, especially not in these turbulent times. It should be the last of our priorities in my view. And the fact that it's actually the first in the Brussels bubble is to me very, very telling of this messianic approach, telling of this narcissism, and of the distance, with the realities of the ground and the priorities of the citizens. It sometimes seems that what matters for the citizens doesn't matter in Brussels, and especially actually in the European Parliament. But still, let's answer the question of my presentation. First, before changing the treaties, let me tell you that they should simply be applied properly. That would be the very first thing I would suggest. As we can see from the several conflicts between the EU and some member states, and especially Hungary and Poland, be it the primacy of European law, be it the rule of law, be it also like the promotion of so-called European values, in my view, the main problems boil down to two things, which is the neglection and the overlooking of two cardinal principles that are now currently almost giving a cosmetic reading in the European Union. As some of you already said, we speak here about the principle of subsidiarity and, in my view, even more importantly, the principle of conferral of competences. Both enshrined in Article 5. The treaty is very clear about it. He defined them really in crystal clear terms. Yet they are largely ignored. By whom? By the European Parliament, obviously. Although, you cannot really restrain the freedom of speech of a political assembly, so they can speak about whatever they like. But I wish also that they had a stronger culture of subsidiarity and conferral of competences, and they will be as vocal on those two cardinal principles as they are on other matters. By the Commission as well, but especially by the Court of Justice, which abuses its theological manner of interpreting European law and therefore blur the lines between the role of the legislators and the judges. And sometimes we have good reasons to ask whether this court thinks it's a legislature or is actually here to judge. Is it here to apply the law or is it here to make the law? I think this is a very important question. A dashing example is precisely like the clash between the EU and Poland on the organization of the national judiciary. According to the European Court of Justice, all those powers that are now turned against Poland stem from one legal base, Article 19.1 of the Treaty of the European Union, which says, 18 words, Member States shall provide remedies sufficient to ensure effective legal protection in the fields covered by Union law. It doesn't say more than that. Do those 18 words constitute a robust legal base to allow the EU to have the last word on the organization of a national judiciary system? Are we sure about it? I read it again. I read it with an enhancing glass. I read it with a microscope. And I don't see how, on the basis of those 18 words, the Commission and the Court of Justice is now telling to Poland how they should organize their national judiciary. And this is even more shocking that they only seem to say it to you, to the Poles, not to any other country. Are we sure that they made the same screening in other member states, for example? Or actually, rule of law also means the discretion to apply them with clear double standards. And that makes me think that I find the European Court of Justice too lonely. It needs a bit of company, I would say. It is the only one in Europe out of thousands of courts which is not subject to the European Court of Human Rights. By the way, because they refused more than 10 years ago. Contrary to the national systems, the national judiciary, it has no counterpower. It doesn't have the equivalent of another court. Look at France, they have 3 Supreme Courts. In Spain, they have 2. In the EU, only 1. And one that cannot even look above and say, oh, the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg is watching me, because it doesn't. It's not. And so that's for me a major problem. This court is already far too lonely. I also believe that the Commission's margin of discretion in launching infringement is too broad. It's almost a political decision. Actually, the case law of the European Court of Justice is really adamant about it. It's for the Commission to decide whether it intervenes or not. So it's an obvious politicization of this process. And I think that if both institutions would stick to a strict and literal interpretation of Article 5 when it comes to the conferral of competences and also subsidiarity, by the way, this loneliness and discretion would not be per se a problem. But if they both neglect this article that is actually a counterpower, then abuse and arbitrariness appear. And this is, I'm afraid, what we are experiencing right now. And this is actually tearing the EU apart. And it's probably its most serious issue today. Let me just tell you one thing. As a Western European, I live in Hungary, but I'm Spanish. It would have been shocking for me 3-4 years ago to hear, for example, that some Poles feel threatened in as much by the East than by the West, pointing at the European Union. I must admit that this sentence no longer shocks me. And when I see, for example, that in times of war, in times of crisis, pragmatism is actually shining by its absence, and that this the ideological approach of the European Union, especially in the European Parliament, is actually much stronger than before. Indeed, that gives me good reasons to be extremely worried about the future of the European Union. And that's why I think, and I'm really, really weighting my words, that we are on the verge of a schism. And I wonder whether there's only one way of being European, and those who are not the right Europeans are declared, like also by the European Parliament, that they are no longer democracies, as they just did with Hungary. Therefore, if the treaty was to be reformed, which again, as I said, is really not the priority in the current times, let me give you very concrete suggestions. I think it should include a new and actually much stronger protocol on subsidiarity. The current one doesn't work. The current one is more like a kind of tick-the-box protocol, but it really doesn't solve at all the issue of subsidiarity and the involvement of national parliaments. We should also foresee a new and strong protocol on the principle of conferral of competences. We should also consider a reverse judicial preliminary ruling for national constitutional courts. Basically, that the European Court of Justice will be forced, in certain circumstances, to ask, to raise a preliminary question to the national constitutional courts that might be at stake. That will be indeed a system whereby the national constitutional courts, will have the last word on the principle of conferral of competences. It's not for the EU court to decide on its own, it must be for the national constitutional courts. Another one is we should also have a clarification, final admissions that the EU's legitimacy stems from national constitutions. Hence clarifying this legal quarrel, but it's also very political, this debate on primacy. It has been going on for 50 years. This debate is older than me, far older than me, actually. And still, as we saw also with the recent case law of the Polish Constitutional Court, it's still unresolved. It is for the member states to clarify it and say that primacy is not a problem within the strict competences of the European Union, but it cannot be sent beyond. And finally, this is something maybe that needs further reflection, but we need also an express control of the application of the law within the EU by national constitutional courts. Let me just finish reminding you something. In June, we had the historical annulment of the Roe and Wade decision in the by the U.S. Supreme Court in the United States. For me, this sentence and this case is about abortion, but it's mostly not. It's about clarifying what are the competences of the courts and what are the competences of the legislators. In this case, in this sentence, so the Jackson and Dobbs from the 22nd of June, the US Supreme Court clearly says the following paragraph, and which was for me the most striking in the whole judgment. The Constitution does not prohibit the citizens of each state, US state, from regulating or prohibiting abortion. Roe and Casey arrogated that authority. We now overrule those decisions and return that authority to the people and their elected representatives. For me, this paragraph was like an elegy, an ode to subsidiarity and the respect of the principle of conferral competences. And when I read it, I wished that our own European Court of Justice would follow exactly the same steps as the US one, and will finally decide that its role is not to make the legislation, but simply to apply the treaties and to apply the law, and to apply them in a literary way, and not always to apply their own sense of equity, their own opinions, and their own principle that in dubio always pro-federalism, which is for me again a perversion of the original EU as we knew it, as Schumann conceived it, and it was basically pretty faithful until, I would say, the Maastricht Treaty. It's a matter of diversity, of cultural and political diversity. It's what a paradox that all the time, trumpeting about diversity, all type of diversities, be it ethnical or sexual or polyamorous or whatever, are the first ones to overlook and to basically put under the carpet the real meaning of diversity, which means that we come from 27 member states that are politically, culturally, and socially different. And this was the beauty that Schumann saw, and this is exactly the beauty that 70 years later, some would like to suppress. And this is indeed a huge danger, and something that might be, even be deadly for the European Union as such. So let's go back to the roots. Let's reread Schumann again. Let's read simply the treaties. Let's apply the treaties, which for me is the best reform we can have right now. And if we don't do that, at least, and if at the end we open a convention, I think we should make sure that the role of the national constitutions will be strengthened, because if some of us do not trust anymore the European Union institutions to ensure this diversity, I'm sure that we can certainly trust some national constitutional courts to do what initially the treaties ask the European Court of Justice and the European institutions to do. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Professor Ballestar, and as well that you, hesitated your hypothesis, indicating at the very end, that your thesis is true, because you use the case of the United States. So some people, some group of the politicians in Europe or European Parliament, they are trying to say, revert the truth arriving from the treaties, and the truth arriving from that Schumann concept, which was to some certain extent installed in the treaties. Of course, very last decades, that the treaties in Maastricht were to some certain extent going into the different direction, or not opposite side, but to a little bit different direction than Schumann was basically willing. But this case of the United States you referred to just shows us that the quality and stability of each nation, each country, very much indeed depends on how we rely, how we believe in government and the political bodies, how they are confident. So if there is not any stable, a follow-up, or just over the time they are trying to change or interpret differently that what is arriving from the constitution, national constitutions, or they are just trying to manipulate that, for instance, for Polish constitution is going to be ignored by them. Yeah, it's something which is against the Polish citizens, for instance. It's against citizens in Romania. It's against citizens in Bulgaria. So this is not just a discussions about how it should be. It's just the attack directed to the certain nations and to certain citizens. So thank you very much again for your recommendations, for your indications, and as well again this case referring to the United States, is kind of a recommendation for different institutions in the European Union that they have very fast changed their direction and approach. It's again from your speeches arriving conclusion that if they will not change their approach, they are just on the way to bankrupt. To bankrupt this a great idea. If you read in the statements of Robert Schuman in 1962, 1 year before he died, he said, remember, if you just focus on the institutions, economy, and the centralized system in Brussels, so the great idea of the European community is going to be bankrupt. So this was like a prophecy, something like 40, 60 years ago, made by Schuman, although in 1962 there were not any signs that this, great idea is going to be bankrupt. So this was a prophecy of the Schuman related to these problems which can arise over the time if you ignore that, very fundamental issues. So now I think in the context of the current speech, we would like, invite Norbert Kleinwächter from Germany. He's a member of the Bundestag, and I just put for him a question, how the model of the European Union institutions should be changed to stop building the superstate. Unfortunately, Mr. Norbert Kleinwächter is not able to be with us because he was called for some certain, important meeting related to his duties, but he recorded his speech. So now we will, play his speech and have opportunity to get acquainted with his ideas. So Norbert Kleinwächter, member of the Bundestag, Germany, go ahead.
Werte Freunde, ich danke Ihnen herzlich, dass ich heute eingeladen bin, zu Ihnen zu sprechen. Leider kann ich nicht persönlich anwesend sein, weil eine andere wichtige Dienstreise meine Anwesenheit verhindert. Aber ich möchte Sie doch sehr herzlich aus Berlin grüßen und Ihnen übermitteln, wie wir im Deutschen Bundestag als AfD, wie ich persönlich die Zukunft der Europäischen Union sehe. Ja, wir sind in schweren Zeiten und oft wird gesagt, in Zeiten, in denen man sich so auf die Gegenwart konzentrieren muss wie die jetzige, da sollte man nicht über die Zukunft nachdenken. Doch sind gerade Vorstellungen darüber, wie wir eine gute Zukunft unserer Europäischen Union erreichen, entscheidend dafür, welche Weichen wir in der Gegenwart stellen. Und um diese Weichen richtig stellen zu können, müssen wir uns auch auf die Tradition und die Geschichte besinnen darauf, was Robert Schuman denn tatsächlich wollte, als er seine Vorschläge für eine friedliche Einigung zwischen Deutschland und Frankreich machte. Es ist ja auch das Ziel der heutigen Konferenz festzustellen, wie wir eine Zukunft der Europäischen Union schaffen können, die eben nicht übergriffig ist, die eben nicht Werte in Ländern und Nationen vernichtet, die eben nicht darauf abzielt, ein überbordendes Europa zu haben, sondern eines der Freiheit, der Demokratie und der Selbstbestimmung. Selbstbestimmung ist bei dieser Frage ein ganz wichtiger Begriff. Denn worum geht es eigentlich, wenn wir uns über unterschiedliche Versionen der Europäischen Union unterhalten? Emmanuel Macron schlug in seiner Sorbonne-Rede genauso wie Olaf Scholz kürzlich in Prag vor, die Europäische Union weitgehend zu zentralisieren. Da gibt es Vorstellungen, das sogenannte Einstimmigkeitsprinzip aufzuheben. Das bedeutet, dass einzelne Länder gar nicht mehr entscheiden können, wie ihr Schicksal in Zukunft aussehen soll. Dann entscheidet eine Mehrheit, dann entscheiden andere, was zu tun ist. Und wie diese Entscheidungen zusammenkommen, hängt oft von internen Prozessen ab. Die Vorstellung, die wir von der europäischen Zusammenarbeit vertreten, muss doch eine andere sein. Selbstbestimmung bedeutet, dass die einzelnen Bürger in ihren unterschiedlichen Nationen durch demokratische Prinzipien ihre Zukunft selbst bestimmen können. Und das bedeutet, dass Willensbildung, dass demokratische Meinungsfindung immer auf der nationalen Ebene stattfinden muss. Es ist der nationale Rahmen, der uns Sicherheit und Ordnung gibt. Ordnung gibt uns wiederum Freiheit. Und in diesem nationalen Rahmen, wo man sich einig ist über die gesellschaftlichen Traditionen, wo man in einem geordneten Rahmen über Werte diskutieren kann, wo man die gleiche Sprache spricht, da kann man optimal demokratische Entscheidungen treffen. Nicht auf Ebene der Europäischen Union. Denn die Probleme etwa Portugals und Bulgariens sind einfach nicht dieselben, selbst wenn wir europaweit über Lösungen zu diskutieren versuchen. Das große Unwohlsein, das viele Politiker, aber auch Bürger mit der Europäischen Union haben, das kommt daher, dass die Europäische Union zu häufig versucht, in Gebiete hineinzuregieren, in denen sie nichts zu suchen hat. Was sollen denn die Barcelona-Ziele, die definieren, wie viele Prozent der Kinder in die Kita zu gehen haben? Ich finde, es ist die Entscheidung eines, vielleicht nicht einmal des Landes, sondern einer Stadt oder eines Landkreises, wie viele Kindergartenplätze man bieten sollte, nicht die von Brüssel. Und was auch mit Kindern zu tun hat, wenn Emmanuel Macron auftritt und fordert, dass die Abtreibung nun als Grundrecht in die Europäische Menschenrechtscharta geschrieben werden solle und jegliches Land, das Abtreibungen einschränkt oder verbietet, nun mit dem Rechtsstaatlichkeitsmechanismus zu bestrafen sei, dann muss man hier eine ganz klare Absage erteilen. Unsere Werte und insbesondere unsere christlichen Grundwerte dürfen nicht von der Europäischen Union eingeschränkt werden. Und darin besteht auch die große Gefahr der Zentralisierung auf Brüssel. Die Bürger hatten nicht nur Vorteile durch diese Zentralisierung. Der Euro beispielsweise ist in seinem Wert stark gesunken. Geldmenge wurde erweitert und wir erkennen das heute an der sehr hohen Inflation im Euroraum. Auch die wirtschaftliche Zusammenarbeit hatte natürlich ihre Vorteile, aber auch Nachteile, die in einem entstehenden Niedriglohnsektor und in einem sich immer weiter ausdehnenden Dienstleistungssektor widerspiegelten. Die Vorteile der Europäischen Union sind ihr Binnenmarkt und ihre gemeinsame Handels- und Zollpolitik. Und an dieser sollten wir gemeinsam festhalten. Gleichsam alle Programme überprüfen, die zu diesem engen Korsett nicht gehören. Viele Förderprogramme haben keinen großen Vorteil gehabt, ob wir an die Bologna-Reformen denken oder eben auch an viele Dinge in der gemeinsamen Agrarpolitik, wo viele Subventionen verliehen werden nach Kriterien, die die EU aussucht, die aber die Landwirte zunehmend belasten. Wir haben das an den Protesten in den Niederlanden gesehen. Deswegen lassen Sie uns gemeinsam einen harten Schnitt wagen, die Europäische Union reformieren, und zwar zu einer großen europäischen Wirtschaftsgemeinschaft, wie wir sie mal hatten, wie sie aber eben auch leichter aufnahmefähig wären für Länder, die uns auch brauchen. Ich denke da an Nordmazedonien, ich denke an Albanien, ich denke an die Ukraine. Länder, die nicht Kriterien erfüllen für eine vertiefte Zusammenarbeit, aber gleichwohl unsere wirtschaftliche Zusammenarbeit wohl verdienen. Wir sollten die europäischen Institutionen auf ein Minimum zurückführen und unsere souveränen Entscheidungen in den Nationalstaaten stärken. Das Modell, das wir von der europäischen Zusammenarbeit haben, sieht vor, dass die Bürger in den jeweiligen Ländern entscheiden, was zu tun ist, und nur Projekte, die wirklich einstimmig gefasst werden, gemeinsam durchgeführt werden. Andernfalls mit bilateralen Verträgen. Wir brauchen auch wieder eine bessere Ankopplung der EU-Politik an das nationale Parlament und die Bürger vor Ort. Deswegen sollten wir das Europäische Parlament in seiner jetzigen Form abschaffen, wo viele Politiker dann doch auf etwas abgehobener Ebene miteinander verhandeln und Beschlüsse fassen, die die normalen Menschen weder kennen noch verstehen. Es ist besser, das in einer parlamentarischen Versammlung zu lösen, dass also die nationalen Parlamente Delegierte entsenden, die ihren Wählern zu Hause verantwortlich sind und in der parlamentarischen Versammlung allerdings gemeinsam versuchen, eine gute Politik zu schaffen, die auf der einen Seite die nationalen Interessen berücksichtigt und auf der anderen Seite europäische Zusammenarbeit begünstigt. Auch die aufgeblähte EU-Kommission müssen wir dringend zurückführen. Es kann nicht sein, dass jeder Mitgliedstaat einen eigenen Kommissar stellt. Für welche Aufgaben denn? Wenn wir uns auf den Binnenmarkt konzentrieren, darauf, dass Wirtschaften gut funktioniert, darauf, dass unser Austausch, auch unser kultureller und wirtschaftlicher Austausch gut miteinander funktionieren, dann brauchen wir keinen Kommissar für alle möglichen Aufgaben. Deswegen sollte die EU-Kommission zurückgeführt werden auf ein Minimum, ein Kommissar, 2 Vizekommissare und einen kleinen Governing Board, das im Endeffekt die Geschicke der Europäischen Kommission verwalten kann. Wenn wir die Rechtszuständigkeit der Europäischen Union einschränken und auf ein Minimum reduzieren, wie das in der Europäischen Wirtschaftsgemeinschaft der Fall sein kann, dann nimmt auch die Rolle des Europäischen Gerichtshofs ab. Es geht hier nicht darum, innenpolitische Angelegenheiten zu bewerten, sondern allein um die Sicherstellung eines positiven Austauschs im gemeinsamen europäischen Wirtschaftsraum. Wenn wir die Europäische Union reduzieren auf eine europäische Wirtschaftsgemeinschaft, dann gewinnen wir alle. Denn gemeinsame Projekte müssen ja nicht aufgegeben werden. Sie werden weiterhin von der EU-Kommission im Auftrag der Mitgliedstaaten verwaltet. Und genau das ist die Stärke. Die EU ist dann kein eigenständiger politischer Akteur, sondern handelt im Auftrag der Mitgliedstaaten, die Projekte für sinnvoll und gutheißen. Und dieses Projekt ist offen für viele Länder, die im Moment noch nicht Teil unserer europäischen Gemeinschaft sind. Konzentrieren wir uns auf den Handel, konzentrieren wir uns aufs Wirtschaften, was im Moment unter der EU-Politik am meisten leidet. Fahren wir viele Projekte zurück und reformieren wir Europäisches Parlament wie EU-Kommission. Wir brauchen ja eine starke EU-Kommission, die sich aber nicht selbst befugt, sondern die im Auftrag ihrer Mitgliedstaaten handelt. Denn der Auftrag der Mitgliedstaaten, das ist der Auftrag der Wähler in unseren Ländern. Das ist eine demokratische Bestimmung der Bürger, die sagen, das möchte ich und das möchte ich nicht. Und damit ist das auch Auftrag für uns Politiker. Ich möchte Ihnen eine schöne Konferenz wünschen an dieser Stelle. Danke Ihnen, dass ich hier auftreten durfte und darf Sie auch einladen in den Deutschen Bundestag nach Berlin. Am 21. Oktober machen wir ab 18 Uhr eine Veranstaltung zum Thema Zukunft der Europäischen Union, wie es weitergehen soll mit der Reform, und werden uns dort auch solchen Themen widmen. Sie sind herzlich eingeladen. Ich darf Ihnen danken. Auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Norbert Kleinwächter. Yes, I don't know how many places you have in Bundestag for 21st October for that debate. So we are going to go over, right? So just send us, the message how many, places you reserved. We will join that debate. We will join, and I think, your statement is great. Your statement is great because, you express in that proposals, with many of them I agree. With many of them, Schumann would agree. Because when Schumann created or was in the process of creation as well institutions, he said, time should be temporary, not permanent, up to the moment when the functions are explored. So nowadays, the thinking about the superstate is just because the people forget about that this organization, the European Union as an organization, cannot be, created as a state, because this automatically, is basically taking back the different functions from the nations. And I agree, the Schumann said about himself as well, and he thought about the approach of the European institutions. He said, I came to serve, not to be served. And Mr. Kleinwächter, you expressed that exactly mode and approach of Schumann. When you say that the European Commission should basically be ordered by nations to do something, but not opposite. So if we imagine that the European Commission has some certain resources, some certain, capabilities of doing that or that, right? So the states say, yes, do this based on our requests and conditions. So in that approach, you are going to be a server, not as somebody who is over, So thank you very much indeed, You basically presented, I would say, not a revolutionary approach. This is exactly what you said. This was approach of the Schumann. When you are saying to resolve the European Parliament, I agree. But just in that place to put some new model. So in the European Parliament should be, one country, one voice. We don't need so many, members. This is just trying to make a copy of the parliaments in the states. So as the member of the parliament, poseł Jońca, said, this is, the European Council. This is the representative of the countries. But of course, the European Parliament, having a one voice, one country, as a kind of a professional body, should be more supportive to the opinion and decisions of the particular countries expressed by the leaders of the countries, by the prime ministers or presidents of these countries. And if we put the question nowadays, does with full respect to all members of the European Parliament, But if we ask the question, how many professional members are sitting in European Parliament? They are professional? I'm not going to answer this question. I just ask this question because what Mr. Kleinwächter said, right? The European Parliament should have some, approach based on the professionalism. They have to be supportive, responsible, educated, with full respect to everybody. So now to just comment a little bit and extend the speech of the Mr. Kleinwächter, we have his co-worker, Mr. Benoit, who would like just shortly, to take a speech. Please go ahead, Mr. Benoit. Just you need to switch on your microphone, please.
My name is Benoit. I am the assistant of Mr. Kleinwächter. If you want to take part to this conference, if you want to ask Mr. Kleinwächter some questions, I have here the flyers, the invitations to the conference. If you want, I put them here, and I can give you the email address of the person who is responsible for your registration for the conference. So I have here the invitation, the flyers. If you are interested in taking part at the conference, you are free to see me after the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we are going to promote at the meeting, in the Bundestag and, to what? Do you have some question or? No question. Okay. So thank you very much, Mr. Benoit.
Thank you.
So now we ask to take a floor Mr. Dr. Egidius Veraikis from Lithuania about responding the question. The question would be, what specific conclusions may be drawn out of this debate towards the changing approach and renewing the European Union? So, Mr. Dr. Veraikis, go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Mr. Krishak. Thank you very much for that invitation. Unfortunately, I cannot be in your place, so I'm speaking from my home office. So, the conference is very interesting, very specific, and what I would like to start from, I liked what a few members, especially Mr. Lafuente, said that European Union looks like the dinosaur. For me, that metaphor of dinosaur is very interesting. I can show you 20 years ago, in 2002, I published the book. I'm a writer. I published the book called Dinosauring Europe. You see it, Dinosauring Europe. So 20 years ago, I predicted that Europe will become like dinosaur, and it will have all the problems that dinosaurs had. Now this imagination of dinosaurs are very strong and very powerful creations, but they also were very vulnerable. And finally, they disappeared because of that vulnerability. So, European Union really is a little bit like a dinosaur. But I have to say, 20 years ago, my country was still willing to come to European Union. I have to confess that I was for European Union all my life. It's my life project really to fight for my country's membership into European Union. I was very happy that we are in the European Union now, but European Union is not something what is heaven, what is not changing, what is great, what is gives us only happiness. Of course, European Union has serious problems, and one of the problems is really with the dinosauring process. I will come back a little bit later to that, but the second metaphor what I would like to say about European Union. For me, now European Union looks like very strong, very well functioning computer of artificial intelligence. It's a very good computer. It's working well, but it's working well only with the programs that he has inside. And when this computer meets the program what are not foreseen in the computer, he stops very quickly, and he don't know what to do. We had a few such events that European Union was not ready for. We have refugee crisis, we have pandemic, and now we have a war in Ukraine. And really, European Union, the computer of European Union, stops suddenly because there is no program how to deal with pandemic, how to deal with war. Generally, in the structure of European Union, war is not foreseen. European Union has to function in an eternal peace. And now, of course, for European Union is very difficult to understand formally, programmally, to understand what the war is. So one of the main problem of European Union is that it's too technocratic. And if you want to go back to Schumann, of course, Schumann did not want to create a technocratic union. He wanted to create union of values. Of course, technocratic union expressed that it has values, but it's very different, because the values of European Union what are declared is mostly technocratic. It's not really spiritual values. So this is one of the problems we have to deal with. And if you look again to Ukrainian war, what we are facing now, I'm reading a lot of European papers, the very public papers, maybe these called non-papers, studies of political scientists. And before war started, before February this year, I read many papers that were predicting that, for example, Ukrainians will not defend their country. Ukrainians will not stay for defense of their country because Ukraine is not valuable country. The democracy in Ukraine is weak. The civic society is weak. The oligarchy is powerful. There's no really market economy. The individual human rights and the sexual rights are not very well developed. So this is a country is not worth for the defending. And what we see that Ukrainians are really defending their country, defending very successfully. So it means that their values, the real values of Ukrainians are not the same as European Union saying. Ukraine, of course, is not a perfect democracy. Ukraine is not a perfect market economy. Ukraine is not a perfect for individual human rights. But it's the perfect country that people love and people defend. So the problem of values, of course, it's not new for you in European Union, are very important. So what more I would like to say about problems of European Union in context of Schumann. Schumann, of course, Schumann did not create the European Union. Schumann predicted the European integration. He created the European integration, but he did not said very clearly what is the so-called finalité. What the final point of that integration has to be. Generally, there is no finals in history. History, unlike Mr. Fukuyama said some times ago, history is not at the end. History is not finishing. History is even, I would say, back on the track, because we have now war, but it's changing history very quickly. So the Schumann's idea was integration, and Europeans, what they did from the Schumann's idea, they did a technocratic project what is called now European Union. Last year and in beginning of this year, I not me only, but we all have the opportunity to follow the event what was called the Conference on the Future of Europe. But supposed to be very important idea to speak with the people and to think what future of European Union has to be. observing the conference, I have to confess that I observed it very carefully. It was very interesting for me, really, to understand what values are in the people's minds. And my first impression was also very metaphoric, I would say. Schumann, when Schumann started European integration, for him European integration was kind of a lovely creation, what he loved very much. And the generation of Schumann, all these fathers of integration look to integration as a lovely project. For my generation, integration is already as a loving mother, loving rich mother. I love my mother. I loved my mother. Unfortunately, I have no more. I loved my mother, but I understood that it is something that is created many years ago. Now, when I am looking for the younger generation, it's funny, but for younger generation, the European integration, they look to the European integration as a grandmother, lovely, fine, loving grandmother, but they understand that this grandmother is not last forever, but one day they will have no such a loving person, and they have to invent something new. So my impression from the conference on the future of Europe was but we European Union have no any fresh idea, European Union for 21st century. We are proposing to younger generation some yesterday's food, heat it in microwave and saying, but it's fresh. But it is not fresh. So one of the problems of European Union now, what it's already the old, I would say, even a gerontocratic organization. So it really has to change. It is going from one test to another test. I mentioned refugees, pandemic, war, and no, European dinosaur understands that he is really more and more vulnerable, and he has to change. Of course, one of my specialties is biochemistry, so I'm a natural scientist. I see many problems in the theory of evolution of Charles Darwin. It's a wrong theory. I can speak about it very much, but maybe not now. But one of the ideas of Charles Darwin was that the dinosaurs, when dinosaurs disappeared, they changed to the birds. And when I reading Schumann's ideas, I think that Schumann wanted to have the European Union as a bird, but not as a vulnerable and having the dinosaur. So how to change this dinosaur to the bird? It's already business for us. So we are living in 21st century, and we have to read Schumann not word by word like some Muslims are reading Quran, but we have to interpret Schumann in the mode of 21st century. What is a very important exercise, very interesting exercise, and I do not believe I'm sure that only the technical changes will not save the European Union. Of course, we can discuss very much how big the parliament has to be. Do we need really the parliament or only parliamentary assembly? How many members of the commission we have? But this has only technicalities what are not changing the essence. I want to remind you the words of famous American and a little bit Polish political scientist Zbigniew Brzezinski, who said that one of our main problems are what we are trying to make technical solutions for spiritual problems. The problems of values of Europe are spiritual, so they are not technical, and only with the technical means in enlarging commission or shrinking commission, changing the name of the parliament or changing the members of the commission or topics what commissioners are are solving. There are many projects. I know them. So these are only technicalities that are really not changing with dinosaur or with artificially intelligent computer. So we need to really think about what the values of Schumann we need in the 21st century. And I have to say, maybe it will not sound very lovely for some people, but when I'm looking to democracy, to the state, what we call the state, a liberal democratic state. We are living in Lithuanian Republic. I'm living in Lithuanian Republic with the democratic society, no doubt. But this liberal democracy suggests us to create very, technocratic state without soul, without spirit. We are encouraging our voters to vote very rationally. Politics is not love. We are demanding from our ministers and governments to make a rational, well-calculated decision. So we hate the government because they are very technocratic, but according to definition they have to be. So this liberal democratic state is also well-functioning computer, but it has very often it has no spirit, no value. So we need to improve not only the European Union as such, European Union institution, but we think but maybe this, no, some people say it, Westphalian state or liberal democratic state, they need changes. You see what we are talking more and more about so-called non-systemic political parties. We call the populism, more and more populism. We don't understand what populism means, but everything what is not good for our understanding we call populism. So we need really rethink all our political life, all our political system. And now when I am observing what British people, how they see the late Queen, but sometimes democracy, sometimes monarchy is becoming more important than democracy, because monarchy is not, how to say, very rational, but if we love monarchy, it consolidates our ideas, our state, our people. So maybe we can create the modern kind of spiritual leadership. I don't know what is name, maybe modern monarchy or something. But we need spiritual leadership not only in our nation states. We need spiritual leadership also in the integrated structures. If we want them to function effectively, because now, of course, I personally don't like the word superstate. What I see in the European Union, it is not the superstate, but it's the union of nation states with super management or super administration. So this super administration does not neglect nation states, but there are all the problems that were mentioned before. So at the end, I would say we are living in a very interesting time. We see, and the people who love European Union and European integration and all our European idea, they see what they need to invent something new. They really the space, the place for new ideas, and I'm happy again that in this conference I hear something that I did not have in my mind before. So there's something new, something interesting, and I am more optimistic than pessimistic. I think we are going generally in the good direction. The war in Ukraine really tell us very clearly what are real values and what are artificial values, invented values. So I think we will be victorious in the sense that our ideas, not technically but also spiritually, will win. Of course, it's not will come very quickly, not tomorrow, maybe not after tomorrow, but in a long-term perspective, European Union understands more and more what to be the dinosaur is not very good. It's better to change to the bird. How to do it, this is up to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Dr. Vareikis. Now, because Mr. Jońca is going to leave for his duty, so be some kind, to express your final thoughts, please.
Tak, dziękuję bardzo. Mój przedmówca wspomniał o Darwinie. To było bardzo interesujące. Słyszałem taką opowieść, że jak Darwin opracował swoją teorię ewolucji i poszedł do prezydenta Stanów Zjednoczonych opowiedzieć mu o tej teorii ewolucji, to prezydent powiedział: panie profesorze Darwin, nawet, że człowiek pochodzi od małpy, to o to chodziło, prawda? To profesor mu powiedział: panie Darwin, nawet gdyby to była prawda, to lepiej, żeby się nie rozniosło. Więc, a my mamy odwrotną sytuację tutaj. Jeśli myśl Schumana się rozniesie po Europie, to wygramy. Dziękuję państwu bardzo.
Now we switch to our next speaker, Dr. Filip Ludwin. He's a Vice Rector of Collegium Intermarium, and his topic is, and he's an expert from in that area, Superstate of Spinelli versus Community of European Nations by Schumann. So, Dr. Ludwin, the floor is yours, please.
Oh, okay, perfect. So, do you hear me? Do you see me?
Yes, excellent.
Okay, but I have a problem with a video from you because I hear you, but I don't see you. I don't see the main room of the conference. But I suppose it's not a problem for you because you see me and you hear me. So
yeah, go ahead. We see you very well and we listen to you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me, for inviting me. It is a great pleasure to be with you as always. I regret that I cannot be with you in person in Strasbourg, but because my other duties, I cannot leave Poland. But in my short speech, I'd like to highlight, I'd like to point out the main difference between Spinelli's concept of Europe and the Schumann's vision for our continent. So we are, generally speaking, we are facing two entirely different visions of Europe. Contradictory visions. And they are strictly connected. They are linked with the history of European integration from the very beginning. As you surely know, Spinelli and Schumann were created their idea of Europe almost in the same time, in the half of the 20th century. So these two concepts are connected each other. They compete from the very beginning and the main question was and is still present: which Europe we want to have? Which vision of Europe Spinelli's vision or Schumann's vision are more closer to us. Which Europe we have to build, to establish. And where is the main difference between these two visions? And I think if we understand correctly this difference, we will be able to understand the main problem with Spinelli's theory too. So, firstly, Altiero Spinelli and his idea presented firstly in the Manifesto of Ventotene. It was a document written during the Second World War. Spinelli and his friend Ernesto Rossi, because the manifesto was written by these two authors. So Spinelli and Rossi claimed that the main problem with Europe is an existence of many different independent and sovereign nation states. These states compete each other. They are conflicted. They conduct many wars between them. And in order to guarantee peace in Europe, we have to, according to Spinelli, we have to do one simple thing. We have to abolish national sovereignty of European states. If we do so, we will be able to establish a pan-European federal state. And if we don't have different and independent states, there will be no reason for wars, for conflicts. All problems of Europe will be solved immediately. And you know, it's a kind of utopian thinking, wishful thinking, in my opinion. Even if we establish a pan-European federal superstate, it doesn't mean that problems between European nations and societies will disappear. It's impossible. It's impossible. The problems with existing so many nations in Europe has this problem. You know, we can call it as a pan-European problem. These European conflicts between our nations and societies and states, this problem should be solved in an entirely different way than Spinelli and Rossi thought. Their theory is extremely simplistic. They indicated one reason of all European problems. Only one reason. Independent, sovereign states. There is too much of these states, and they are conflicted. They have different politics, and therefore peace in Europe is unable to reach, according to Spinelli. Of course, Spinelli and Rossi pointed out some important reasons of for example, of the Second World War. Of course, some their remarks were correct, but the core of their theory was too much simplistic. This is the most important thing that I'd like to say here. This theory is too simple. Why? And one more thing. Spinelli and Rossi, their theory is constructed on the top-down model. You know, the federal superstate has to be established by some elites, by some enlightened politics and thinkers upon the European societies. This project has to be implemented as quickly as possible from top down. It's not a natural effect of enrooted in a will of European societies. You know, Spinelli and Rossi wanted to create a kind of artificial construct. This federal superstate is extremely artificial. It's not an effect of natural evolution and progress. And this is the second important problem with this theory. And as for Schumann's idea, Robert Schumann thought in an entirely different way. Schumann looked for a comprehensive solution from bottom up, not from top down, but bottom up. Schumann was aware that a real peace and real common European union or community. It is the best word. That real European community has to be enrooted in a common European values shared by all European nations. Without this cultural understanding, without this cultural basis, this cultural background, a real community is impossible. So, firstly, we have to find out some basic common ideas and values typical for European culture, originated in a Greek philosophy, Roman law, and Christianity. And after that, when we do it, we will be able to think about some common European institutions that helps us in obtaining and reaching a peace in Europe. And Schumann's concept, in my opinion, Schumann's concept is an example of organic theory. Theory emphasizing emphasizing the role of ordinary people that have to understand each other, that have to communicate each other. And this is, in my opinion, the core idea of Schumann's concept. Spinelli and Rossi presented something entirely different and something utopian. You know, at the end of my speech, I'd like to add that it's not strange in a case of Spinelli and Rossi. These two thinkers were Marxists. They were Marxists, and like Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, they believed that we are able to indicate one main reason of all problems of humanity. Marx and Engels thought that private property is this reason. If we abolish private property, all our problems will disappear. Very simple. Spinelli and Rossi didn't share this point of view, but instead of abolishing private property, they said about abolishing national sovereignty. You know, the model of thinking is the same. This is the same simplistic model of explaining our reality. The difference is in indicating the main construct that is problematic. For Marx, this is private property. For Spinelli and Rossi, this is national sovereignty. And like in a case of Marx and Engels, abolishing private property didn't solve problem of humanity. The same problem is with the theory of Spinelli and Rossi. We see that abolishing of national sovereignty doesn't solve our problems. Conflicting Europe, conflicting interests in the European Union are still present. Federalism, radical federalism, is not a solution, in my opinion, and we see it. We see that it's not a solution. Recently, a big nation, a big country, the United Kingdom, saw it very clearly, and this country decided to leave the European Union. So that's all what I wanted to say. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any question, I will present here and I will ask for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Ludwin. You were our last speaker, and what? Połączył się. Okay, look, we had some, troubles to connect Professor Carlos Miguel from Spain, excellent professor of the constitutional law, University of Santiago de Compostela, very known place, Santiago de Compostela, right? And we wanted, Professor, you tried to hesitate the following question. How much the European community may be weakened by attempts of subordinating member states' constitutions, and what is the danger behind that? So the floor is yours, please. Chcę, proszę Państwa, powiedzieć, że w tej chwili, że tak powiem, w ramach tak zwanego procesu tłumaczeń czy zasad skończyły się tłumaczenia. W związku z tym my rozumiemy po angielsku, prawda? So, dear professor, just go ahead, the floor is yours. Słuchamy po angielsku.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your invitation. I'm very pleased to join, even virtually, this meeting about such an important questions that have been raised here. As the title of the presentation says, there are two questions that I am invited to answer, or at least to share some reflections about them. First is how much the European Union may be weakened by the attempts to subordinate member states' constitutions to the European Union legality. And then, what is the danger behind that attempt? Well, let's go to the first question. How much the European Union itself may be weakened by such attempts to impose its legality over the super legality of the member states, that is, the constitution. As you know, a constitution is defined by one characteristic among others, of course, but one is that a constitution, to be called, to be an authentic constitution, is the highest legality in a legal order. In a state, the constitution is the supreme law of the land. Well, if the European Union attempt to subordinate the constitution to the legal order of the European Union, of course, there is a danger for both parties. First, why there is a danger also for the European Union itself. Then we will make some comments about the danger for the state. But for the European Union itself, I see one danger mainly. That is that in every political organization, in every state, in every political community, you need to preserve the continuity of that organization, to grant stability to that organization. You need at least two elements. First of all, of course, you need the power, possibility to impose the law. But as you know, it's not possible to place one policeman behind every citizen. And this is why every, of course, healthy, we could say, political community, political organization, it tries to not to impose its laws, but just to convince the citizens that the compliance of these laws are good not just for the state apparatus, but it's also good for the citizens themselves. And this is why I think that the attempt of the European Union to, we cannot say overrule, but to impose its legality, to the legality of the member states, has a serious risk to alienate the addition of the citizens to this organization. Of course, the citizens of a state feel themselves more identified with its parliament, with its government, because it's the result of a direct election by these people. And of course, because there are some controls over it. But we all know that the authorities who rule the European Union are not directly elected by the citizens. Well, you can say you are sitting in the parliament, but the parliament itself has been elected by the citizens. Well, it's true, but it is worth to remind that the European Parliament alone cannot enact any law in the European Union legal order. You need also the Council, and the Council is just the executive, the meeting of the executive of the several member states. Could we accept in our states that the laws should be made not by the parliament but by the council of ministers in every state? Of course, we don't accept it. So, and of course, in our states, every political group can introduce a bill to be discussed in the parliament. We know that in the European legal order, with a very, very exceptional case, with except a very exceptional case, only the European Commission might introduce a bill in the parliament to be discussed and to eventually be one law, or of course directive, or no matter the name, but a law of the European Union order. So it means that citizens, of course, are far from the decision center in Brussels. And it means that if we give priority to this legal order that is so far from the citizens over a legal order enacted by the citizens themselves, for instance, a constitution with a referendum, we risk to alienate, of course, the citizens, the European citizens, from supporting the European Union itself. So this is the first risk that I see in of course, in this attempt to impose the European legal order over the constitutional legal order, which is the most important law enacted by the people in a state. The constitution is, of course, not just the supreme law of the land, but, and I go to the second point, and I go to the second question, it's also the law enacted by the sovereign itself. It means that if we consider that the law created by the sovereign itself that is le pouvoir constituant. And another law which is not made by the sovereign itself receives a higher rank. It means that the people is no more sovereign. So the danger behind this position is to consider that the real sovereign in such a legal order is no more the people, but a ruling elite. So this should be the end of democracy, which is really a paradox, because the treaties say that the main values, the main principles of the European Union, or among the main principles, is the respect of democracy. Well, you cannot respect the democracy if you consider that a law enacted by other than the sovereign people has the highest rank, the highest position in the legal order. So, in my view, the attempt to subordinate member states' constitutions to the European Union legal order has two different risks, real danger for the European Union itself and for the states also. So this is why I think it should be wise to divert from that way and to take another path in the building of the future of the European Union. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Ponieważ because we do not have translators anymore, right? So yeah, that's now. Ja chciałem jakby pewne tutaj takie te refleksje. So Professor Miguel, thank you very much indeed for. I'm just trying, to comment in the Polish. Some not comment, but just my a little bit very interesting. I mean, your speech indicated of the real, direction how we should, treat the importance of the individual constitutions. Proszę Państwa, to jest tak, Lincoln powiedział, demokracja to są rządy ludu przez lud i dla ludu. I konstytucja odzwierciedla lud, wolę ludu. I ona jest kształtowana przez lud. I jeśli lud ją kształtuje, to lud ją rozumie. I w związku z tym lud się jakby poddaje jej. I teraz tutaj dyskusja nad jakby tym próbą nadrzędności tak zwanego prawa unijnego nad naszymi konstytucjami jest po prostu niszczeniem demokracji. Tak jak tutaj pan powiedział. Nie da się zrobić jednej konstytucji w wielu narodach, w których specyfiki, charakter i tak dalej są różne. Ja sobie, to już jest moje dopowiedzenie, sobie wyobraziłem, jakbyśmy chcieli stworzyć naukę i zasady w tej nauce, która by obejmowała i biologię, chemię, fizykę i tak dalej. No przecież to jest niemożliwe. I tutaj ta różnorodność narodów właśnie powoduje, że ta specyfika narodu, ludu odzwierciedlona jest w konstytucji. I nie da się, nie wiem, tej charakterystyki, która dotyczy, nie wiem, Francuzów, Belgów, Włochów, prawda, ująć Polaków, tak? Bo próba ujęcia tego w jednej konstytucji będzie marginalnie rozumiana przez każdego. To będzie jakaś fikcja. I profesor dochodzi do wniosku, że w związku z tym tworzenie takiej konstytucji jest instrumentem i właściwie takim, można powiedzieć, narzędziem dla elit, czyli dla, nie wiem, oligarchii, jakichś elit, które chcą, prawda, sterować nadrzędnie, że tak powiem, tworzyć chaos. No jak się tworzy chaos, to właśnie dzieli i rządź, prawda? Także tutaj wydaje mi się, że z tego wywodu jasno wynika, że jest jakieś przemyślane działanie, żeby degradować narodowe konstytucje właśnie w imię sprawowania centralnej władzy. Czyli tutaj dochodzimy chyba do wniosku, też z wypowiedzi pana profesora wynika, że właśnie to jest narzędzie realizacji superpaństwa. Absolutnie. I Trybunał tak zwany Sprawiedliwości w Luksemburgu no jest instrumentem, który jeśli staje w pozycji, że konstytucje narodowe są nieważne, no to znaczy, że ten lud, te narody, które tam mieszkają, stają się właściwie tylko elementami i przedmiotami. I tutaj jeszcze jedno zdanie do wypowiedzi pana doktora Ludwina, mianowicie Spinelli to jest ten, który chciał i chce tworzyć superpaństwo. W Parlamencie Europejskim jest grupa Spinellego. Niestety do tej pory nie ma grupy Schumana. Od kilku lat ja apeluję, Instytut apeluje o utworzenie takiej, tu nie chodzi o frakcję, tylko chodzi o taką, można powiedzieć, ideową grupę. I niestety jej nie ma. A grupa Spinellego robi właśnie takie działania ideologiczne. To jest dość liczna grupa, tam też jest paru europosłów polskich, która wywiera presję, różną presję właśnie na innych członkach Parlamentu Europejskiego. Między innymi, proszę Państwa, kiedy rozpoczęła się wojna na Ukrainie, w 5. dniu tej wojny zebrała się grupa Spinellego w sposób tajny na konferencji, żeby obradować, jak przyspieszyć superpaństwo. Tu w parlamencie, w budynkach Parlamentu Europejskiego. No przecież publicznie ta konferencja nie została rozpropagowana. Dzięki temu, że mamy, że tak powiem, odpowiednie źródła informacji, to dowiedzieliśmy się o tym. No jak można w 5. dniu spotykać się i obradować nad przyspieszeniem tworzenia superpaństwa? Przecież widzimy, że właśnie w kryzysach, w czasie wojny, takie ideologie najszybciej, że tak powiem, się rozwijają. Zamiast się skupić na pomocy na Ukrainie i tak dalej. Więc tutaj widzimy, że mamy do czynienia z pewnymi właśnie środowiskami, które mają przemyślane strategie. Teraz ja proponuję w ten sposób, żeby so to all speakers, we just have some time, unfortunately we do not have translators anymore, but we have some time, something like 30 minutes to extend some, some certain opinions you had, czyli do prelegentów, prawda, że jeśli ktoś chce rozszerzyć, coś jeszcze dopowiedzieć, to zapraszamy, ale możemy zrobić w ten sposób, że może ktoś z sali ma jakieś pytanie do prelegenta specyficzne, może coś nie zostało powiedziane, czy proszę bardzo, w języku polskim można sformułować, przetłumaczymy.
Jego został wpisany do oficjalnego dokumentu kierunku rozwoju Unii.
So, are you there with us? So, Dr. Ludwin, the question is, w jaki sposób idea Spinellego została wpisana, czy wpisana w jakiś sposób do dokumentów Unii Europejskiej? Mógłby się pan do tego odnieść, jak to wygląda, w jakim stopniu te, można powiedzieć...
Jak to było osadzone prawnie i na jakiej podstawie zostało to wpisane do oficjalnych dokumentów Unii? Manifest komunistycznego działacza marksistowskiego, gdzie podpunktów destruktujących człowieczeństwo i tak dalej w jego manifestie jest dużo, dużo więcej. Nie? Wspomniane zostały tylko 2 kierunki marksistowskie przez prelegenta.
Tak, panie doktorze, czy mógłby pan się do tego odnieść? Prosimy. Doktor Ludwin jest...
Czy mnie słychać?
Tak, oczywiście, słyszymy.
Odpowiem po polsku, rozumiem?
Tak, tak. Proszę po polsku.
Znaczy tak, jaki jest status prawny manifestu z Ventotene? On został wspomniany w Białej Księdze, która wyznacza pewne kierunki, możliwe, pożądane kierunki rozwoju Unii Europejskiej w przyszłości. To nie jest akt prawnie wiążący, to jest raczej deklaracja. Trzeba też wspomnieć, że manifest Ventotene został tam wspomniany też w towarzystwie innych niejako inspiracji ideowych dla integracji, więc ta jego obecność jest powiedzmy troszeczkę ukryta, ale sam fakt oczywiście już wzbudza niepokój. Swego czasu odbyła się też pewna ceremonia na wyspie Ventotene, gdzie został pochowany Spinelli, bo on był więziony na Ventotene. Tam był obóz dla więźniów politycznych za czasów Mussoliniego i tam właśnie ten manifest powstał, gdy oni byli w areszcie domowym na wyspie Ventotene. Pojechali tam i Angela Merkel, i Emmanuel Macron odwiedzić nagrobek Spinellego, więc są to pewne gesty symboliczne, bym powiedział. Nie możemy mówić tutaj o pewnym przełożeniu tego na literę prawa bezpośrednio, ale mamy do czynienia z pewnymi gestami symbolicznymi, a wiemy doskonale z historii polityki, że takie gesty torują drogę do implementacji pewnych rozwiązań w praktyce potem. Rola mitu w polityce, rola pewnej świadomości propagowanej, to odgrywa znaczenie oczywiście i dlatego to jest martwiące, że Spinelli, który wprost prawda, przeciwstawiał się wręcz demokracji, który mówił o rewolucyjnym, odgórnym właśnie narzuceniu pewnej koncepcji dla społeczeństw Europy, jest tak honorowany we współczesnej Europie. To jest bardzo niepokojące i dlatego warto przeciwko tej koncepcji oponować.
Tak, pan doktor tu dobrze się odniósł. Niestety, proszę państwa, w takim dokumencie dotyczącym dyskusji na temat przyszłości Europy zostało zawarte, można powiedzieć, kierunki, w których odnosi się do Spinellego. Czyli można powiedzieć, że tam jakby w tym dokumencie się nic nie mówi o Schumanie, o De Gasperim, o Adenauerze. Tutaj właśnie ja się dziwię, dlaczego Niemcy. So why the Germans, are not just raising a voice, a hand, just saying why Adenauer is not mentioned, in basically that document about the future of Europe. Dlaczego Adenauer, prawda, Spinelli nie jest, Niemcy powinni się buntować, gdy tymczasem dokument ten o przyszłości Europy, gdzie się faworyzuje Spinellego, jest zaakceptowany przez, że tak powiem, grupę prowadzoną przez pana Webera, przez panią Urszulę von der Leyen. I wiele osób, prawda, tutaj, którzy jakby w tej procesie dyskusji na temat przyszłości Europy wykluczali osoby, które promują ideę Schumana. Niestety tak się działo i tak się dzieje. Dlatego musimy mieć świadomość, że to już nie ma nic wspólnego z wolną debatą, demokracją, że to, co powiedział pan poseł, że benedyktyni spisywali wszystkie dokumenty, żeby taka była wolna debata naukowa i myśli, a nie, jakby można powiedzieć, sterowanie tym wszystkim. No właśnie takim przykładem sterowania było właśnie ta debata grupy Spinellego na początku samej wojny na Ukrainie. Jakie są jeszcze pytania? So I just suggest, do może Katrin, tak? Proszę, może zróbmy tak do Katrin, bo ona była pierwsza i chcielibyśmy, żeby, bo teraz jest kolej na nią, żeby ona rozszerzyła swoje wypowiedzi.
Okay, I have a general question. I would like to think about those countries who would like to have a supranational.
Proszę powiedzieć po polsku, żeby to do nas wszystkich tu.
Tak, zastanawiam się nad tymi państwami, które dążą do utworzenia superpaństwa. Zastanawiam się nad tym, że ta idea spowodowałaby również zatarcie się ich granic kulturowych na tle wszystkich krajów, więc z ich punktu widzenia właściwie oznaczałoby to też dla nich stratę, z punktu widzenia ich państwa, bo to byłby taki uogólniony twór, więc czy można byłoby się odnieść do właśnie tej kwestii? Dziękuję.
Thank you very much for your question.
Dziękuję za
I don't know if I have the answer as such, but
nie wiem, czy umiem odpowiedzieć.
first of all, I'm saying that I learned a lot today as well.
Bardzo dużo się dzisiaj nauczyłam.
And I see even more clearly that the identity of the nations should be safeguarded as much as possible.
Jeszcze bardziej jasno widzę, że właśnie identyfikacja i suwerenność narodu powinna jeszcze bardziej być zabezpieczona i w jakiś sposób różnymi mechanizmami. Może tak.
But at the same time, I think we should also see that it's not that the whole European Union is wrong, but that we have to purify the system as it is.
Jednocześnie rzeczywiście tu ja się zgadzam, że nie powinniśmy uznawać za tą całą wspólnotę europejską jako złą do odrzucenia, tylko mamy zadanie do jej oczyszczania, do jej uzdrawiania. To jest jakby zgodne z tym, co Jan Paweł II chciał.
And that solidarity should be the link. There should always be effective solidarity in everything.
Solidarność, efektywna solidarność powinna być we wszystkim, oczywiście, jeśli jest to solidarność.
And that implies respecting differences.
I w związku z tym to implikuje respektowanie różnic, różnorodności.
Your question. Why the bigger countries, for example, are so much for a kind of super-state?
Dlaczego same kraje są za superpaństwem? Ja bym tu dodał od siebie, że
I don't know. I don't know, but I think that power blinds.
Nie wiem, ale jest w tym coś ślepego, jak jakaś ślepota władzy, jakiegoś dominacji, prawda, siły czy władzy.
And as the EU gets ever more power, you cannot see well. That's why I also meant with the cataract.
Jeśli Unia czy instytucje dostają coraz więcej władzy, zaczynają być ślepe jak katarakta, przestają widzieć właściwie.
I think that we have a lot of mud on our souls. Well,
Mamy w naszych duszach wiele,
EU. There's a lot of mud.
znaczy tutaj chodzi o Unię, tak, o instytucje, wiele mglistych właśnie obszarów wewnątrz.
And that we have to, also one of the speakers said it very clearly, I think it was the Greek one from Lithuania, we have to have this soul back into the European integration project.
Tą duszę trzeba przywrócić, duszę właśnie tą pierwotną, tego ducha. Tutaj rzeczywiście pan z Litwy o tym wspominał. Tak.
And the soul is the spiritual, cultural European heritage.
Tak, duch jest właśnie tym fundamentem tradycji i kultury europejskiej.
And I think it was very illustrating what, now I forgot his name, the one who mentioned it in the United States, the one from Hungary. He mentioned what he mentioned about abortion and the United States, how they reacted over there. I think that is an extremely good example of how also the EU, that the EU can learn a lot from this.
Tak, ten pan z Węgier, profesor Balestar, odniósł do tego przykładu decyzji Sądu Najwyższego w Stanach Zjednoczonych o tym, że zabijanie dzieci nienarodzonych jest błędem, znaczy nie wolno, że zgodnie z interpretacją konstytucji robiono to wbrew prawu. I to jest dobry przykład pokazujący, jak powinny korygować swoje działania instytucje europejskie.
May I say one more thing? But I also think that the EU, when it is purified, it can do so much good. And also on a supranational level. For example, what I mentioned about this fighting floods, desertification, moderation in economics. I think those things are very, at least the ones of floods and desertification, also beyond European borders, that is something that EU could carry out.
Tak, ta Unia, te instytucje zostały tak zanieczyszczone, jeśli one będą oczyszczone, tak, one jakby mają ten mainframe, te ramy, w jaki sposób one jakoś pozostały jeszcze od Schumana, to mają ten potencjał, żeby właśnie realizować poprawnie projekty. Tutaj jak ona mówiła o tym, prawda, tych migrantach, przyczynach, prawda, jak to naprawiać. I jest to może taki sposób powrotu do tego źródła.
Bardzo dziękuję.
Bardzo dziękuję. Są jeszcze jakieś pytania?
Jeśli można.
Ja mam pytanie takie. No tu profesor mówił o tej sytuacji, dlaczego Niemcy nie zareagowali na to, żeby swojego tutaj Adenauera powiedzmy gdzieś promować i tak dalej, jego myśli Schumana, Adenauera i Gasperiego. Bo myślę, że w Niemczech się troszkę zmieniło to wszystko, tak? Tam z powrotem wrócił Marx i Engels na tapetę, tak? I ta ich ideologia zaczyna tu królować, tak? I tak samo to ma przełożenie tutaj na Unię, tak? Po prostu tutaj jest już za dużo marksistów, prawda, komunistów i tak dalej, którzy kierują tą Unię na takie lewackie tory, prawda? Adenauer, powiem szczerze, został tylko, jego nazwisko zostało jako fundacja Adenauera, tak? Która działa też w Polsce i w Polsce działa tak, że działa przeciwko ludziom. No, tak to można określić, bo oni wspierają wszystkie rzeczy, które są związane z LGBT, tak? Właśnie z aborcją, z prawami kobiet i tak dalej. Oni po prostu przejmują wartości, no powołują się na Schumana, tak? Na parady się organizuje Schumana i tak dalej. i powołują się na Schumana, że oni też walczą o wartości, ale oni chyba nie zrozumieli, co to są wartości chrześcijańskie.
So he's rising, you know.
Oni tolerancję, prawa człowieka i tak dalej przyjęli, że to są wartości.
Znaczy ja zrobię syntezę tego, żeby... So the question is why, you know, in Germany they do not promote Adenauer or De Gasperi in Italy, you know, because, you know, we noticed that since a few decades, you know, the Marx and Engels is coming, you know, to the voice. Like Dr. Ludwig said, you know, the promotion of Spinelli is just coming back, you know, to that ideology. So is that some certain right explanation, you think? If we just ask the question why the De Gasperi and Adenauer is not promoted, why the Germans are not, you know, trying in the European Parliament to speak about the Adenauer that he together.
That would be very good.
Yeah?
That would be very good, yes. Very good idea.
Wykorzystuje się Schumana po prostu przekręcając wartości, o których mówił Schuman, tak? A oni zrobili z tych wartości chrześcijańskich jakieś swoje wartości.
Okay, so what we can do, you know, let be, you know, 21st of October in Bundestag, you know, and just suggest Germans, you know, to promote Adenauer, because Adenauer promoted Schumann, and ask Italians to promote De Gasperi. So then this triangle is going to be more active, right?
I can say there is a friend of mine who is working in Brussels in the Parliament. She wrote a book on the on the fathers. So the Schumann, Adenauer, and De Gasperi as the founding fathers of the European integration project. You could invite her also once. Yes, very good.
I mogę jeszcze chwilę?
Oh yeah, sorry, can you explain?
Tak, ona, pani doktor, organizuje takie wydarzenia i tak dalej i pokazuje właśnie tą trójkę i będziemy się chcieli do tego dołączyć. Już wczoraj rozmawialiśmy, żeby w takie różne uniwersytety w Europie, ale nie tylko uniwersytety, żeby właśnie to promować, czyli zachęcać instytucje w Niemczech, tak, żeby one głosiły Adenauera, we Włoszech De Gasperi, we Francji Schumana, a Polska będzie, że tak powiem, wzmacniać całą trójkę. So what we say in Germany, you know, they should, you know, basically promote Adenauer, in Italy, you know, De Gasperi, France, Schumann, right? And in Poland we will, promote these three guys, right? Because we just in favor of this, you know,
John Paul II.
Yeah, do you agree with that?
With John Paul II?
No, I mean, I know you agree with John Paul II, but with that concept, promoting of these three guys, you know.
Yeah, very good, very good.
Ja myślę, że potrzebny jest taki szeroki, mocny ruch w tym kierunku, żeby tego Schumana z powrotem pokazywać wszystkim i tak, wyjąć go, kurczę, na wierzch, żeby on tu był numer jeden. Ja się tylko dziwię, że no jest tutaj tych europarlamentarzystów, tak, w tej takiej prawicowej frakcji bardzo dużo. Czy tu jeszcze nie powstało nic takiego jak frakcja Schumana? Bo powiem szczerze,
the Schumann group was not erected in the European Parliament because there is a Spinelli group and there is no.
They don't want Schumann. They don't want Schumann. No, that's a pity.
Ale powiem szczerze, że
right-wing parties, you know, they are not acting towards to establishing, you know, that Schumann group.
Że była taka sytuacja, bo ja śledzę tutaj czasami różnego rodzaju głosowania, tak, i było głosowanie takiej rezolucji Unii Europejskiej w sprawie LGBT, tak, i okazało się, że 150 posłów było przeciwnych temu, a 46 chyba nie zagłosowało ani za tym, prawda? Czy to nie można wykorzystać takiej sytuacji, tych posłów gdzieś tam zebrać i zrobić z nimi jakieś spotkanie i zacząć coś robić w tej materii tutaj, w tym Parlamencie Europejskim? Bo jak się nie zacznie tego robić, no to tak będzie wszystko trwało i trwało, a to całe lewactwo będzie miało cały czas przewagę. Dziękuję.
Okay, so let's spróbujmy już właściwie podsumować, że tak powiem, naszą konferencję. Jako myślę, że takim dobrym, skrótowym podsumowaniem ten wniosek z tego właśnie, żeby wracać do Europy Schumana, jest właśnie współdziałanie z Niemcami, z Włochami i z Francuzami w zakresie promocji tej trójki. Schuman de facto, jakby można powiedzieć, był liderem w tej trójce. Okay? I w takim razie myślmy o działaniach dotyczących właśnie takiego połączenia i zobaczymy, prawda, nieraz się dziwią niektórzy ambasadorzy w Polsce, dlaczego my promujemy Francuza, tak? Pamiętam kiedyś ambasador Niemiec mnie przyjął właśnie poprzedni, znaczy jeszcze poprzedni. I mówiłem właśnie o Adenauerze. On się dziwił, dlaczego promuje Adenauera, prawda? Byłem w ambasadzie Włoch z ambasadorem, się dziwił, dlaczego promuje de Gasperiego. Ale jednak po pewnym czasie ambasador Niemiec, ten jeszcze poprzedni, zadzwonił do mnie i uczestniczył w naszych konferencjach. To samo ambasador Włoch. Ambasador Francji niestety na wszystkie zaproszenia odpowiadał nie. Zbyt pewnie. So I now, in English, so to all speakers who are still, with us, we would like, thank you very much indeed for your, participation, your contribution. We are going to conclude and finish our conference. And the conclusion we just proposing is that, in the direction to come back to the Schumann Europe, we need to cooperate with Germans, Germany, Italy, and France towards the promotion of Schumann, Adenauer, and de Gasperi. So we will notice how much Germans like Adenauer, okay? If they are not going to promote it, means they don't like him. And then it's question why. The same to Italy, right? De Gasperi, very
But
much.
they were Europeans, huh?
Good.
They wanted to promote Europe, not only their country.
But create a coalition of basically citizens, right? And as well with the French. So the rule and the goal of that coalition would be that these three guys can be promoted not only from the perspective of the interests of a particular country, but promoted from the perspective that they three guys, made many years ago a coalition which changed the Europe after the Second War. So this is a certain conclusion we can make, and we will try, to go ahead in that direction. So again, thank you very much indeed, Margaret, for your contribution. Thank you very much, for all the speakers who are still with us, and as well those who just left. And especially my personal thanks are to Norbert Kleinwächter from Germany, because you presented some certain very concrete, steps towards the, adjustment of a different, European institutions. And I think this is a direction we can, to some certain extent continue. And again, thank you for basically invitation for that meeting in Bundestag on the 21st of October, talking about the better future for Europe. The better future for Europe. So it means if we speak the better future of Europe, it means that nowadays the current situation is not good.
okay? So the better, it means now is not good, so to improve that. So thank you very much indeed for all of you as well for the presence.
Siedzieli, bo